call the meeting to order and just allow the public gallery to fill.
How members for the temperature? Is it a bit warm or you're okay?
Nice. Just nice.
Just nice.
Just pleasant. Okay, can I advise those in the public gallery as they take their seats that they are very welcome and they can use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. They can also connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi, password details of which are available on the gallery rules, and it is not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. Okay, members, agenda item 1 is apologies. We've received apologies from Justin McNulty. Are there any other apologies?
Here.
No? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2 then, Chairperson's business. Can I indicate to members that you may have noticed recent press reports in respect of precautionary measures in schools designed to limit any spread of coronavirus. The Public Health Agency is providing updated guidance, and I would suggest to the committee that we would write to the Department of Education seeking urgent assurance that schools are clear on how to provide a proportionate response whilst keeping parents, pupils and indeed our committee informed. Are members agreed? Agreed. Okay then, agenda item 2.2 is our supply resolution debate. Members will be aware that in the supply resolution debate on Monday the 24th of February, I spoke on behalf of the committee, commenting on departmental financial performance in 2019 to 20 and indicating the committee's support for the department's resource and capital builds, whilst emphasising the need for reform in addition to investment. The Finance Minister advised that the executive budget will be agreed at the end of March, following information on the spending envelope, which it is understood will be available on the 11th of March. Clerk, will we receive detailed briefings at that time?
I think the committee will probably seek that. There'll be a further budget bill and as part of that sequence, so I will advise the department accordingly.
That's great, thank you. Okay, members then, draft minutes. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of our meeting on the 19th of February at page 6 and seek members' agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 4, matters arising. There are no matters arising unless anyone wishes to raise an issue. No? Yeah.
Just around,
yes,
you had mentioned the coronavirus there,
yep.
and this is something that's bothered me for a number of weeks. I know the Health Minister has confirmed to the House that he and his department are ready in the event of an outbreak, and I trust his advice to the House, and I know that every preparation, particularly in terms of policy in the event of an outbreak, is being considered. But there doesn't seem to be across the various departments any obvious preparations been made in terms of providing simple guidelines or a fact sheet of what symptoms to look out for the ordinary, if we're talking about education, teacher, classroom assistant, and how they would identify potential threats of coronavirus within the school. So even simple things, again, I was doing a lot of reading into this, hand sanitisers, strong soap, guidance around hand hygiene, cleaning surfaces, and ensuring that people are on alert for this, because we're looking at a situation now with an outbreak in Italy. There's also an outbreak in Tenerife, two areas where quite a huge number of people from Northern Ireland travel to throughout the year, and that would pose a significant risk to the people we represent. Also, in terms of school trips, has there been any guidance provided? We need to seek clarity on this, Chair, as to whether there's been guidance provided to principals in relation to trips already organised out of Northern Ireland to areas that potentially have faced outbreak or are at risk of outbreak. And the risk that poses not only to our students and teachers directly, but also the consequences of that when they return home here to Northern Ireland. I have a great concern that given the pressures of our health service, Chair, that in the event of an outbreak when we are not properly prepared in advance of any potential threat, that it would put our health services, which are particularly under strain as it is, under significant pressure. And I think that these proactive measures, particularly throughout education and schools, will help alleviate pressure and possibly avoid any mass hysteria in the event of an outbreak in any particular area. So I think there's a number of things that we really need to start looking at, Chair, and posing questions to the department, to the education authorities, to what policy has been rolled out to give teachers and principals guidance to look after their students and to be conscious that this is a real issue. It is spreading at a rapid rate. Lives are at risk. And if we're sending our pupils out into other countries, what measures have been taken to ensure the safety of those children and also our teaching workforce and those at home when they return?
Okay, thank you. Robbie, would you like to come in on this
Yeah,
as
just
well?
I think Daniel's point is actually particularly well made. Given what has happened, I think it's in Tenerife where the infected person is actually a doctor, and I think of the proximity that teachers and other people have to other people's in terms of a potential spread. But I'm minded in terms of certainly supportive of information, but we also have to be cognizant of the pressures that schools are already under in terms of budget. So the point again about soaps, hand sanitisers and face masks, I noticed that on a news release there, in some of the countries, they have none left because there's been panic buying. So it's about that measured response, but an appropriate response. And I think the points are well made and something that we should action today.
Okay. So, as we had agreed, members, we will write to the Department of Education seeking an urgent assurance that the guidance is being provided to schools with regards to responding and preventing. And perhaps we can add to that if any additional resources are needed with regards to the services that permit prevention, that they're being provided as well. And that supplies are in place to continue to meet that need. I mean, I'm content as well that once we receive that response, if it's in any way deemed not adequate, that we call officials to the committee as soon as possible next Wednesday to speak to those matters in detail. Are members content, Daniel?
I think, Chair, it's important to urge in any correspondence sent to the department, because I think everyone is conscious that this is a real issue. However, I think we need to strongly put weight that this must be a proactive as opposed to a reactive approach, and that schools really need to be prepared now with the huge threat we've seen this week in terms of schools that have been in Italy, the mass hysteria that's been caused even in the last 24 hours. People are panicking and worried about this. So I think that if we have or are being seen to be proactive in relation to this, it will avoid that mass hysteria if or when, someone said to me this morning, an outbreak does occur.
Okay. I mean, obviously the measures that have been taken by schools in Northern Ireland have been deemed to be precautionary, and there aren't confirmed instances in Northern Ireland at this stage, but I think it is only right that we do seek urgent assurances on all the matters that have been raised today. And you know, once we receive that, if we need to follow it up in any way in persons, then we're happy to call officials to the committee and or to meet with them outside of next Wednesday if that's deemed helpful as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Happy to correspond with any schools as well that feel that they have been inadequately advised or assisted in relation to this. Members content?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay then, members, agenda item 5 is our Department of Education and Education Authority briefing on early years and childcare. I would refer members to the clerk's cover note on early years childcare at page 15 of our packs, the Department of Education briefing on childcare at page 30, and early years at page 36. Draft childcare strategy of 2015 at page 46. Department of Education Learning to Learn framework of October 2013 at page 112. EQIA report on EA's proposed preschool special school framework at page 168. And previous correspondence from the Department of Education on early intervention programmes and Sure Start at page 213. Can I therefore welcome our officials to the committee today, Mr. Paul Brush, Director of Youth and Early Years at the Department of Education, Miss Linda Drysdale, Head of Early Years Intervention Programme at the Department of Education, Miss Cathy Galway, Head of Childcare Unit at the Department of Education, Tina Dempster, Childcare Unit, Department of Education, and Pat Ward, Assistant Director, Pupil Support Services and Children and Young People Services at the Education Authority. You're all very welcome today. Thanks very much indeed for coming to our committee. The committee has received a number of briefings from the department in recent weeks, and members greatly appreciate the written information that has provided. Sometimes some of the presentations have been a little less detailed or comprehensive than we were hoping for, so I'm hoping that by our limited number of issues at today's session that we can give the department opportunity to speak to the matters at hand in detail. So we're very glad that you're here to talk to us about the extremely important issue of childcare and early education, and on another occasion we'd be glad to come back to the detail of Sure Start programmes as well. So can I invite you to make a short presentation of 10 to 15 minutes and then open up for questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, thank you for the invitation to cover this subject of early years and childcare. It is quite a wide area, which sort of is the reason for the number of people in front of you this morning. And so let me just reintroduce them and give you a sense of what they each cover so you get a feel for the team in front of you. My name is Paul Brush. I have sort of policy responsibility for early years and youth within the department. To my right, we've got Pat Ward, and Pat really, I suppose, is my counterpart within the Education Authority on the delivery end of things, around a lot of that child education, the preschool education programme, those sorts of issues. Then we've got two on my left from the childcare unit. As you know, a specific unit was established within the department to look at the potential for an extended early years childcare and child education offer, and that's Cathy and Tina, and they can talk to that. And then we have Linda on my far right, and Linda is the manager for Sure Start. So while I know there's a separate session in Sure Start in a few weeks' time, it is very much part of our early years portfolio. So we're more than happy to take some questions on that this morning as well. So feel free to do so. So by way of introduction, I'll give you a bit of an overview of some of the key developments in the early years sector over the last few years, and then I'll hand over to Cathy to talk a bit about the specific childcare end of things. So, I suppose generally worth saying that the body of evidence that there is out there now for the value of investing in early years is pretty uncontested. I'm relatively new to this area of policy, and I have to say I don't think I've ever worked in an area where there is such a body of evidence behind the value and the return on investment for public policy commitment. And that's international evidence, and it goes through all the stages of early years development. There's a lot of work around the first 1,000 days of a child's life and the importance of brain development and language development in that period. So what we're talking about is really, really important, and certainly we get that within the department. The policy document that really still is the existing stated position on this is Learning to Learn. Now, it was first produced in 2013, so it is 6-7 years old, but still remains relevant. And I suppose I would like to give you a sense of some of the key developments that have taken place as a result of that policy position, and then probably point out a few of the areas that haven't progressed and where there are current challenges that we need to be looking at. I suppose one of the main developments over that period is the fact that we now have a universal preschool child offer, an education offer for all children in their immediate preschool year, and that is universally available for every child whose parents want it. And we can talk a little bit about the implications of that and some of the challenges that remain even in that space. There's also been huge development in the quality of that provision, and the Education and Training Inspectorate inspects all of that and is giving very good ratings to the majority of settings. So we're not just interested in every child getting something, we want every child to get something that is quality, and that's a key aspect of progress in recent years. The admissions process for that year has just in the last couple of years gone online, so that has proved successful. 97% of parents applied online, and while there were some teething problems last year, those seem to be largely addressed this year. In terms of what children actually get in that year, there's been quite a lot of work done to develop and refine the curriculum guidance so that the preschool year is part of a continuum for the transition into P1. It's not something on its own. It's not something that we just expect to be repeated when children go into P1, but it's actually part of a foundation, part of that foundation stage. So there's been a lot of work done in determining what that should look like. Of course, it's all part of the play-based learning approach. There's been also significant progress in the support made available to the Irish medium preschool sector to build the capacity and improve the quality in this developing sector. And there's support available through Altram, who's the current provider of that, to Irish medium preschool settings. Parental engagement, it's not all about what happens in that preschool place. A lot of the child development literature suggests that how parents interact with their kids is as important. So a lot of what we've done in the last few years has been aimed at, I suppose, educating parents around what they need to be doing and how to do that and supporting them to do it. So the Getting Ready to Learn programme has really been quite an innovative thing where parents have been encouraged to come into the preschool setting. There's been various initiatives explaining to them the value of play, the value of talking to their children, and the evidence coming out of that shows that parents are playing, reading and talking with their children much more than they were in the past. So there is useful evaluation evidence coming out. One of the things I was here last week to talk about was this developmental review at the age of 3. And I think that's part of another developing agenda, and that is how we measure all of this. There are challenges in the measurement, but the 3+ review is a really innovative attempt to get a handle on how well we're doing. And I suppose that goes to another aspect of what we've been focusing on, and that is really building on the collaboration across departments. And the 3+ review is an excellent example of collaboration with the Department of Health. This whole early years agenda is not one that a single department can take forward on its own. So collaboration specifically with health is key in a whole range of areas, and we can tease out some of those as the morning progresses. And as well as sort of those universal provisions, we also have a suite of targeted initiatives that are aimed to support children from more disadvantaged backgrounds, to some extent to level up when they start primary school. And I suppose the chief amongst those would be Sure Start, and we can talk a bit about the role and the challenges within that programme. So what are some of the issues? That's good progress that's been made, but what are some of the issues that we're currently addressing and going to need to address over the next year or so? Well, birth rates are falling, and that creates specific challenges in the sector, not least around the number of underage children going into some of those preschool settings. And while on the face of it that actually might seem like a good thing because they're getting a couple of years, it creates a lot of strain in those settings because the teacher is having to address the issues for children across a much wider developmental age span. Another area we're going to need to address is the socially disadvantaged criteria that gets applied when children are actually applying for a preschool place. It's legally a requirement at the moment that children from specific benefit backgrounds get prioritised, but with the rollout of universal credit, that needs to be updated because it's still based on historical benefits. So there is a clear requirement to bring that into line with where we are and where we're going, but it needs legislative change and couldn't have been done in the absence of an executive. It would be remiss of me not to mention the budget pressures that are faced in this sector, as they have been across the whole department as a whole. But I think it's fair to say that the early years areas have, to some extent, there's been a real attempt to minimise budget reductions in this area. Now, demand has been growing, and in most cases the budgets haven't been, but at least they haven't seen some of the cuts that have been experienced in some other areas, and I suspect that is because of the clear evidence of the need to invest here. Indeed, there's even been some modest increases in terms of the amount given to non-statutory preschool providers for the preschool places. This was increased a little bit in 2018-19 to take account of the increasing pressures on them. But we know that there are still challenges there, and I visited a number of these preschool settings myself since just coming into the role, and they are under significant pressure, and the extent to which we remunerate them for those places is something that the Minister has asked us to look at. There are growing numbers of children with special needs, and this is again really manifesting itself in the preschool context. And as you know, significant work has been done by the Education Authority to look at what needs to be put in place to support those children, and we can explain where that work currently stands. So a lot has been done. Those are some of the big challenges, but it's very much an evolving field, and I think this is where I'd want to bring in Cathy around what the whole, I suppose, aspiration around an extended childcare offer might look like, and how it interacts with all of those things that I've just described, because the objective here is to put in place something that's integrated and holistic and not just built on. So I would ask Cathy just to say a few words about that aspect.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. As Paul said, Tina and I are from the recently established childcare unit in the Department of Education, and as you will see from the briefing note, the childcare strategy is being taken forward on a phased basis. The draft strategy that was consulted on by the former OFM DFM in 2015 has dual aims, so it's child development and promoting parental employment. And both of those aims were broadly welcomed by everyone who responded to the consultation. The 2015 draft set out a number of objectives to make childcare available, affordable, sustainable, diverse, high quality, and to allow parents to make informed choices and, as Paul said, to integrate with or complement educational and youth services. It also proposed 22 interventions to meet these objectives, and a detailed analysis of the consultation responses was undertaken and completed by DE, which we've been leading on finalising the childcare strategy since 2016. I've provided an overview of the main findings in your paper for today, but as you can see, generally respondents supported the vision, aims and objectives, apart from the sustainability objective, which many people felt was at odds with trying to promote affordability and quality. I think some respondents saw it as the settings becoming sustainable rather than the system of childcare being sustainable. Others wanted an increase in resources, including capital, and to ensure that all of the actions could be fully implemented, that there needed to be a dedicated resource. There were calls for commitments to an extended offer of 30 hours, similar to those in England and Wales, with some respondents highlighting the need for dedicated resources and legislation. So the childcare strategy, as you know, is an executive strategy, and therefore it requires executive consideration and approval to publish in final form. In terms of the current context and what we've been doing to update it, because that strategy went out for consultation almost 5 years ago, We've been working collectively with other departments, and Paul's referred to the collaboration with health. But our objective is to improve outcomes for children and young people in the context of Outcome 12. We give our children and young people the best start in life. And in the draft PFG consulted on in 2016, there was an action to extend responsive quality provision in early childhood education and care initiatives for families with children aged 3 to 4 for up to 38 weeks a year. Extensive engagement has taken place with our colleagues in the other jurisdictions to understand the early education and care offers that are available there, either the ones that are in place or those that are emerging. In Scotland, they're introducing theirs from the autumn. I've set these out at a very high level in the briefing paper. We've actively engaged and continue to do so with colleagues in other jurisdictions through the British Irish Council workstream for early years. And we work also with HMRC colleagues and locally with the Department for Communities in terms of the support available to parents through the tax and benefit system. In terms of an extended offer, in other regions, the overall offer includes the existing universal early education offer available. So when people say there's a 30-hour offer in England, the 30-hour offer in England and Wales is only available for working parents. So in England and Wales, there's the universal preschool, which we have here, and then there's an additional hour, there are additional hours for working parents only. In Scotland, they are moving to make that available for all parents, whether they work or not. Here in Northern Ireland, we have very successful preschool programme, as Paul said, but not all parents here can access the same type of preschool session. So in terms of developing a funded early education and childcare offer for 3 to 4-year-olds, it needs to be considered in the context of the existing universal preschool education programme. And in that context, there's an extant policy action from Learning to Learn to standardise patterns of attendance in preschool. And our current programme offers between 12.5 hours a week and 22.5 hours a week, with 40% of parents currently getting 22.5 hours a week preschool and around 60% of parents getting 12.5. So we already have a system where the preschool offer is different. So when we're looking at how we would develop an extended offer, we need to think about it in that context and in the context of having an action, an agreed policy action to standardise it. There's currently no additional funded childcare for children aged 3 to 4 in Northern Ireland. So we do have a subvention scheme, but it's not a funded offer for 3 to 4-year-olds for childcare. We have therefore been developing potential options for what an extended offer could be in the context of a standardised preschool offer. As you know, Chair, we have provided an overview of some illustrative options at recent meetings of the All-Party Assembly Working Group on Early Education and Childcare. By way of an example, one option could be to standardise all preschool to full-time. The estimated additional cost of offering 22.5 hours a week for all children is about between 18 million and 20 million a year, additional to the current budget for preschool. That would also include an additional free school meals element for those children who would be entitled to free school meals who were having a longer day in preschool. We also estimate that this could require up to £20 million capital to create the capacity for the children who would usually attend afternoon sessions, because our preschool programme operates, some of our nurseries operate a dual day. So children come in the morning, have their 2.5 hours, go home, and another set of children come in the afternoon. A funded childcare element of around 7.5 hours per week would require between 26 and 30 million additional resource per year. So in that one example, we would need approximately £50 million extra a year to fund and create and develop a 30-hour offer, if that was for all families. That's just one example. There are a number of options, and there vary in degrees of how much we would need, and it averages between 37 million right up to 70, 80 million per year, depending on which option the executive decides to go for. So other options have been developed, and we've been engaging directly with some early years settings, but we are keen to engage further on this, because we need to have a better sense of the capacity in the sector, the state of readiness, who could move to whatever the option is. And Paul and I hope to hold an insight lab maybe in the coming months to discuss the implications of standardising the preschool offer in the first instance, if that's what the executive decide to do. All of that is subject to ministerial consideration and executive approval. So what we're looking at the minute are options. Nothing has been decided. So in terms of updating the strategy, we will be taking account of all of the responses received to the 2015 consultation, recent developments in tax and benefits, so the priorities set out in New Decade, New Approach, which has reaffirmed the commitment to an extended offer, and the extended early education and care services available or planned in other jurisdictions, because it's good to be able to learn from those and what's happened elsewhere. So as highlighted in the briefing paper, there are still some key policy and resourcing decisions that are required to agree the scope, combination of hours, the eligibility and the investment required to deliver an extended offer. Whichever option is agreed cannot be funded from the existing preschool or wider education budget. Although it will require significantly more investment, that offer is just one aspect of finalising the strategy. It has wider aspirations for childcare services for children not to 12 and potentially up to 14. Other proposed actions are aimed at improving the quality of provision in terms of workforce development and support, revising the current grant scheme and including potential for possibly a capital element, responsive and inclusive provision, so not just numbers, not just to focus on numbers of places, but on the types of places that parents require. Childcare for children and parents with disabilities, disadvantaged children in rural families. Enhancements to the information and support for parents, and how we deliver all of this in partnership. So I hope I've provided an update on how we're developing the strategy, including the offer, but at this stage, it's not possible to outline exactly which option will be taken, because that is something that needs the executive's consideration, particularly around the budget and the resources available to deliver all of the actions. But happy to go into detail and answer questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Kathy. Any other officials to present? No? Okay. Well, thanks very much indeed for your initial presentation. Early education and childcare in particular has been a key issue raised with me since I became an MLA in 2010, and as you've referenced, I also act as acting chairperson of the All-Party Assembly Working Group on Early Education and Childcare, and I'm sure other members will be acutely aware that the cost of childcare for many families is second only to mortgage, if second at times now. So it's an extremely important issue for families across Northern Ireland, and indeed for this committee. As you rightly alluded to as well, there is a very clear commitment in the new approach document, although I'm not quite sure why the new approach document refers only to 3 to 4 age bands, because that wasn't the tenure of the debate in the Programme for Government Working Group that contributed to the new approach document, but it is what it is. You also mentioned a lack of cuts in relation to some of these areas of provision. The budget for childcare couldn't be any less for there to actually be any cuts to it. So that's an issue in itself. Childcare strategy, as you rightly say, was from 2015. I think the Programme for Government commitment for a childcare strategy has dated back to 2011 at least. So it is quite shocking that the Northern Ireland Executive does not have a fully completed childcare strategy in place. Officials were bound by the lack of ministerial authority for 3 years of that time period, so it's only right that we acknowledge that. But a key issue for us to address. Can I ask initially, in terms of the standardisation of universal preschool provision, you've set out the cost there. Does the department have a preferred option in terms of what option to take for the standardisation of preschool, and why are we at a status quo where provision is so unequal across Northern Ireland? You said only 60% of parents have access to 12.5 hours early education preschool, whilst 40% have access to 22.5 hours. Why has that system been allowed to develop so unequally?
I think it's largely historic. So whenever preschool was available, it was available in large full-time nurseries, statutory nursery schools, whenever there was the preschool expansion programme back in the late 90s, it expanded on a part-time basis to try and get the capacity up so that all children could access a preschool place. And over the years, that preschool education expansion programme has been finding places and supporting the development of places in nursery units in primary schools and in voluntary and community playgroups. So we're now at capacity, and I think we reached the capacity that we needed in around, around about 5 years ago. But it developed keeping the existing full-time and developing part-time, and then there was a bit of a dip in the birth rate. Some of the provision converted to full-time, and then Learning to Learn brought in a moratorium and any more conversions to full-time, while we then had another spike in the birth rate and we needed more places. So it's largely historic, but Learning to Learn in 2013, there was a policy action to standardise it, and we haven't been doing that. And now we've got this other policy, intent, which is to develop a 30-hour offer. So now we're looking at it and saying, well, if we've got to develop a 30-hour offer and we have an opportunity to do that, and we have this extant policy action to standardise preschool, and the 30-hour offer is built around preschool, then that's an opportunity now to look at how we would standardise that, and there are a number of options to doing that, either standardising it all upwards, standardising some of it down, or equalising it 15 and 15. So they're sort of the options that we've been looking at.
So whether you accessed full-time provision or not was fortune of your birth year and the birth rate, rather than an intentional policy and provision issue?
It wasn't intentional. I think whether you can access full-time or part-time is based on where it's available at the minute. So
Right.
In some settings, they would have only dual days. They would only have... So the whole voluntary and community provision is part-time only. So they are granted to provide part-time places only. The full-time places are only available in statutory nursery schools or nursery units in primary schools.
But that's not a capacity issue, that's a funding issue. Community and voluntary sector, I'm sure, could adjust their hours of provision if the resources were made available to them, yeah.
This could be an opportunity.
Okay. Can I just one quick follow-up? Has research been conducted to examine what amount of hours per day is optimal?
I was actually going to say something on that, actually, because I think part of the part-time, full-time, when you look at it at face value, you could conclude that people on part-time are getting something significantly less, and less in an educational, developmental point of view. But the research on that has been evolving. In fact, a few years ago, the sense would have been that the shorter number of hours may have been the sort of optimal from an educational development point of view. Now there's been some more recent research that suggests no, in fact, a bit more might be the optimal amount. So there is an evolving evidence base on this. Also important to say that the curriculum...
Surely you'd want that to be a fairly established point of view for you if you're making significant decisions around standardisation. So has the department reached a position on what the optimal number of hours is?
I think we're of the view that it would be difficult to take hours away, and on that basis that the evidence is now suggesting that towards the upper limit of hours is probably the more advantageous developmentally. It also gives the settings more time to deliver the curriculum. The same curriculum is delivered in a part-time day as a full-time day, but with some of the other pressures that I mentioned around the increasing challenges of SEN pupils, a full-time day clearly offers more opportunity to deliver that curriculum in a balanced and organised way.
So is the standardised option that you're considering standardisation to 22.5 hours for everyone then?
That is one of the options. In terms of the actual research, there is some research around the EPNI, the effective preschool provision, Northern Ireland, some of that research and some of the more recent research around that says, cognitively, as Paul said, you could deliver the curriculum, and cognitively they get the same offer in the 12.5 hours per week. but where there are opportunities to increase children's socialisation skills and to eat together and to maybe have more experience of outdoor play, engage with parents. You know, the research is there in parts. It's not completely, you know, you couldn't say, well, that research tells us for definite that this is better, but there's emerging research that, you know, that could be a better way of delivering part of this offer potentially.
Which is interesting, because the Education Authority moved to reduce special school nursery provision to part-time in recent years as well. So it'd be useful to hear about the early years framework for special educational needs in due course as well. The one key observation for me in relation to the option that has been listed, not in a way to say that it is a preferred option or a main option, but the option that you have listed, is that consistent feedback being received in relation to childcare challenges was the need for flexibility as well. So standardisation of early education preschool to presume that would be four and a half hours per day, is in some other jurisdictions the 30-hour provision could be taken in a flexible way across 1 or 2 days, for example. So is that still an option that is being considered, and could you respond to the departmental view as to whether or not that flexibility is as important to the department as it seems to be to families, particularly working families that are trying to balance childcare with part-time work as well?
Well, because whatever offer is available for 3 to 4 year olds will build on the existing preschool offer, that one option, of course, is to keep the status quo, where we continue with the 12.5 hours and provide an additional funded 17.5 hours around that. You know, that is another option that we're looking at. But consistently, in terms of the preschool education programme, a lot of the correspondence that the department would get is around, well, why am I only getting 12.5 hours early education when other parents can get 22? So it wouldn't solve the issue of not having a standardised preschool day. And there's not an awful lot of flexibility in terms of it's delivered 5 days a week, 38 weeks a year in line with term time. But parents could opt, you know, if it depends. The additional hours of childcare, we wouldn't stipulate that they have to be delivered in the same setting. So there would be some flexibility around when they take so if the option of 22.5 hours was adopted, they could take the 7.5 hours and use it at any time, and use any registered provider. That's the thinking at the minute. These are all illustrative options.
Okay, keen to bring other members in as well, so can I invite Daniel McCrossan?
Thank you for your presentation, Cathy, and Paul also, and welcome to the other guests, to the witnesses to the committee. These are important matters, and long rumbled on with the need for a resolution to some of them, and some of the biggest challenges for working families is around childcare, and the Chair has rightly expressed the difficult circumstances that families find themselves in at the end of the month in terms of a mortgage and childcare, and then everything else after that. But before I focus on some of the presentations, I would just like some clarity, because I know that Pat Ward is the Assistant Director from Pupil Support Services and also Children and Young People Services for the Education Authority, and there's just two matters, Pat, maybe you'd clarify for me. One is special education still under the Children and Young People's Services Directorate of EA, or has it been moved recently? And secondly, has there been changes in the senior leadership of the Children and Young People Services at EA in recent days?
What I can tell you is that special education is still under Children and Young People's Services. There have been changes in the recent weeks in terms of the management responsibilities within CYPS. Those changes are something that have been taken forward by the EA corporate leadership team. At present, whilst I can confirm that special education is still under CYPS, the management arrangements are different for special education. Any further information, I think, would be something for the corporate leadership team in EA to take forward, because I know that they've already reported through this committee that they have conducted an audit, and I know that there have been some consideration of that audit and in terms of sharing it with members.
Thank you for,
They reported an audit. They
Yeah.
didn't report changes to senior management responsibilities, but I'll let Daniel
Chair,
proceed.
I know without getting into any detail or putting anyone in a difficult situation that there's been significant changes to the leadership of CYPS, and there really needs to be some transparency around why those changes took place, what led to those changes, what exactly are those changes, and who took those decisions as well. And I think it's important that in light of some of the huge challenges around this particular area, that information is shared with this committee as soon as possible. And I can say, without naming anyone, Chair, that a senior member has been removed, someone that's very well known within this area, and we need to have clarity as to why that has happened.
If I can confirm that I will feed that back to our corporate leadership team and ask that they come back to the committee with clarification in that regard.
Thank you. Chair, do you want to go on with that?
No,
Is that right?
you can proceed.
Just in relation to the presentations, the two aims of the childcare strategy are very good. Child development and parental employment. Has there been any measurement of how effective we've been at achieving the aims of that, and particularly around the employment one? Has it helped parents get back to work anyway?
I think some of the feedback we've had from the other jurisdictions where this offer is in place is that whilst you can't make a direct comparison between, you know, so many people going into employment, what it has done in terms of them, Wales in particular, they have asked parents, you know, what has this enabled you to do? For many people, it has enabled them to go back to work. For some, it has enabled them to take on additional work or to apply for promotion or to undertake training and development opportunities or work different or longer hours. So there is some feedback in terms of the other jurisdictions that it has removed the barriers that might have been there. But it is going to be quite hard to directly attribute a childcare strategy with, improved uptake in the labour market.
Okay. And in relation to that, in terms of measuring whether it's been a success or not, that is from parents who went back to work, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so parents availing of the offer.
Yeah.
So they've been asking parents availing of the offer, and there are a number of ways where we could measure improved outcomes in this, because one outcome will be a direct, qualitative indicator of increased uptake, but in other jurisdictions they've been measuring the outcomes for the families directly in terms of what it has done for them at a personal level, what it has done for their income, what it has done to enable them to work a more flexible have a more flexible work-life balance, and actually to apply for different things that would enable them to go for promotion or to work longer hours. So it is self-reporting from parents in some cases. Obviously they do have figures. We could check whether they have any direct figures in terms of labour market increases, but it is going to be difficult to make that direct case.
Thank you. And Chair, if just another moment. Of the 22 interventions identified, have we attained the objective of one place for every 3 children? And what alternative rural models have you come up with? And how effective are these models? And have all children with disabilities been catered for as intended in that regard?
No. There were, as I said at the start, this was sort of this was developed on a phased basis, this strategy, and the first 15 actions in the Bright Start aimed to create additional places. The Bright Start subvention scheme has created, sustained or maintained around 2,500 places. Its aim was, I think, 7,000, but there is a bit of an issue there because it counts disadvantaged areas, rural areas, and childcare on the school estate, which can all be the same thing. So there's an element of that where we're not sure, in terms of you could be double counting some of it. It could be in a rural area on a school estate and disadvantaged as well. So it didn't meet the 7,000 target, but that's not to say that it hasn't been really successful in terms of what it has enabled settings to do. But it is a subvention scheme. It's not funded places. It's just helping to fund and offset the costs. In terms of disability, there's a holiday grant scheme.
The Department of Health runs a holiday grant scheme for disabled children, and it is funded through the Bright Start funding that is currently They support about 10 settings, I think, was last year's figures, about 288 children over that summer scheme period.
Okay, just the figures are a wee bit striking. So 2,500.
Very brief, Daniel,
We're
just
going
to
to
close,
take
yeah.
7,000 was the target. Why such a?
So they said the Bright Start scheme, there was like 3 areas that it would support disadvantaged families and disadvantaged areas. It would be in rural areas or it would be in school estates. So we fund about 2,500 places, but we're counting places. But you could have one place that's in a rural area on a school serving disadvantaged families. So we don't count that as 3 because it actually is only one place. So you're never going to meet the 7,000. You know, you could be in 5,000 or 6,000, but we don't want to double count. So what we're saying is actually places created or sustained was 2,500. But if you actually say, well, you'll count that one place in a disadvantage, then you'll count the same place as meeting the rural needs, then, you know, you could extrapolate that up, but it would be double counting.
And some
terms of
settings,
places.
some settings have become sustainable over the time and have dropped out now of the scheme. I think the key thing that it raises for us, though, and it came through in the responses to the consultation, having a target that is purely quantitative actually is not really that meaningful, because what respondents to the consultation said is, you know, don't word your interventions or your actions in terms of creating X amount of places for this type of provision. Actually just have responsive provision that meets the needs in the community or at a regional level. You know, have more of a sense of what the actual need is in an area, rather than, if you like, creating a number of places in anticipation that they're going to be needed. It would be much better to focus on the quality of the place, on the type of place, and have a better sense of what the need is, because, you know, it is just, that was just a subvention scheme, very important subvention scheme, and Tina and I have had lots of feedback from settings saying it was essential to them at the time to make it more affordable for parents in the area. But I think we would not have targets like that, quantitative targets in this revision, in the revised strategy.
Chair, can I have a wee brief moment? It's
Very
just
quick.
one other question. Thank you for that as well. Why do you think that 80% of parents attaining the first preference choice is a high percentage, and surely the aim should be 95% plus?
Is this on the preschool
Yeah.
programme? Okay, so it's around 87% first preference place. Well, it's probably because you'll never be able to meet the exact first preferences with the number of places available. So an awful lot of settings are oversubscribed. And when they're oversubscribed, then the parents go down to their next choice. But I think at stage 1, it's around 95% of parents get a place in one of their preferred settings.
That is actually quite high, and it has actually increased over recent years. And it is about the fluctuations in need in particular wards and particular areas, and it's about having that flexibility. If you couldn't possibly provide first preference to every parent for their child, it would be impossible to do so. So I believe that 86 is quite high.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
thanks, Daniel. Morris Bradley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. We're having a presentation, sure, started in March and extended schools in April, so I'll not dwell on that there. But it's in relation to the funding. We had the budget yesterday. How confident are you that you have the funding even to maintain the status quo? Even if, as you say, Kathy, you were to go for an all preschool option, it's an extra 50 million you need. Are you sure you can draw that down? How do you go about that?
No.
No,
So,
short answer.
What's happened is it has been identified as pressure. So it's included in the overall pressures that the department has identified, and it will be a matter then for the executive to decide on the priorities for spending. But it is included in the pressures. So I think for the next 3 years we've identified pressures, potential pressures of 15, then 30, then 45 over the next 3 years. So if the executive agree and commit to an extended offer, it will do so on the basis of the money must be available to support it, because it isn't available in the department's current budget, or something else would have to stop in the department's current budget to allow us to pay for that. We don't have baseline for childcare at all. So even the money that comes to pay for the Bright Start subvention scheme comes from central funds. The DE doesn't have any budget at all for childcare. The preschool budget is around about 57, 58 million per year. So the additional money required to implement this extended offer, once the executive agreed what it is they will agree it on the basis of this is how much it costs to deliver it. So it's a pressure at the minute, and
I guess the budget position for everything else, excluding the sort of childcare bit, is simply assuming the status quo. So there are pressures that would necessitate increases in some areas, like Sure Start is an example. So the budget bid, the department at this stage assumes a status quo allocation based on the table you'll have received within your briefing pack.
Even at that, is the finance adequate for the status quo?
Well, there are definitely pressures, and you know the pressures are around areas like Sure Start provision and the growing demand, and the fact that we need to review how we're targeting and where we're targeting, because there's now more up to date information on the multiple deprivation measures. So there are wards that we. If we were applying that more up-to-date methodology, we would want to provide Sure Start provision, and that would have a cost implication. There are undoubtedly cost implications around the SEN, Special Educational Needs enhancements that the Education Authority will be bringing forward in due course. So it's very much a budget position to maintain what is there, but what is there in some cases will not be adequate to address some of the pressures that we know are already in the system.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just one
Yeah,
quick
go
one.
ahead, Marsh.
You mentioned it yourself there about areas of deprivation. Have you managed to increase from 20% to 25% coverage in some of those areas?
Do you want to take that one?
Yes, that expansion has completed, so we're now delivering Sure Start in at least the 25% most disadvantaged areas.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Marsh, thank you. Catherine Kelly.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm sorry I had to leave in the middle of it, and I apologise if some of this has already been answered. For me, childcare in rural areas, especially west of the Ban, and in particular for Mana and Oma, is very, very little. There's very little provision because it's largely rural. And I think that we need to see, especially when you talk about today's current climate with universal credit, we need to ensure that there is an alignment with the previous executive strategies and frameworks to ensure that childcare doesn't become a barrier to people who have, because we know that the payment is only every 5 weeks and the childcare provider needs that payment up front. So families, parents are constantly in debt, and it doesn't, and especially too when we see the closure of the childcare voucher scheme, which was crucial to a lot of working families. I've just a couple of questions. Will there be a consultation on the revised strategy, and what would the timescales be? And who would the consultation be with? And taking into account that the ministerial and executive consideration of the budget and resources has to be looked at as well.
so it's 2015. This was consulted on the strategy, but at that time there wasn't an action in that draft for an extended offer. The extended offer was consulted on, though, in terms of having an extended offer as part of the 2016 programme for government, and that was, welcomed by most people. I think what we're looking at is in taking a finalised strategy to the executive for approval, the Minister is updating everything in terms of the consultation responses from the 2015 draft, issues in the references in the 2016 programme for government and the new decade new approach. If there was legislation required, then obviously that would go through the legislative process, which requires consultation. But in terms of whether they want to go back out again to another consultation on the childcare strategy, saying this has been in development since 2011, you do wonder about the, how welcome that would be out in the sector. I think where we're looking at now, and that's a decision, for for the executive, but what we're looking at is in terms of how we would implement whatever that extended offer is going to be, that would require significant engagement and almost into a co-design process, because the whole childcare strategy has been taken forward on a co-design basis with lots of engagement and lots of workshops. So it's a balance between, do we want to go back out again and reopen, some of the things that have been consulted on so many times, but there is an issue in terms of, is the system ready to deliver whatever this extended offer is going to be, and what will it look like and how long will it take? Because this is not something that, even if the executive agreed this next week, could be put in place the week after. In the other jurisdictions, whenever the policy remit was clear, it has taken 3 to 4 years for the actual implementation to happen, because of the way the sector would need to respond. So I think that's why we would like to do the Insight, the Innovation Lab, which came through the all-party group, to try and get a sense of what are the implications, what are the risks, what logistically, do we need to be thinking about? Because a lot of this is a concept at the minute, and we need to get into, well, what are the risks? And our key focus will always be not destabilising the preschool education programme in whatever comes through, because that has been and is so successful, and it has something like 94% uptake at the moment. So there are a lot of questions, Catherine. So in terms of whether the executive wants to go back out on a consultation, you'd have to think about, well, what would we all get from that? But I think there is a need for a very specific engagement in terms of implementation of whatever this offer is going to be.
I think too there's amazing work done by the likes of Employers for Childcare and Parenting NI and others who for the past 5 years and longer have been carrying out the surveys with the relevant stakeholders, and that's all there. And from that we can see how much in crisis our childcare system is and how much pressures there are on families. Just another wee question. Bright Start, Cathy, you mentioned it. When the Minister and the Department are looking at the childcare strategy afresh, and as you're doing at the minute, Bright Start has been crucial in a lot of areas, and it was initially a 3-year pilot. Where does it stand in a revised strategy? Will it still be available, or will there be something brought in to replace it and to replace, I suppose, the negatives of it that weren't working well?
I mean, that was the Jane will say about the current Bright Start in a minute and what the plans are. But in terms of the responses to the consultation and the feedback we have had from, we have been engaging during this period with a wide range of stakeholders. The Bright Start is a subvention scheme. It was a pilot, and that pilot has continued on in the absence of an agreed executive strategy. When we look at the responses and when we see it, we're thinking, well, there probably is still a need for something, because the 3 to 4 offer is just for that age range. The other age ranges all need some form of support as well, and particularly coming through the responses where there's nothing for 0 to 2s. When we've been, drafting the revised strategy, we have been looking at the need for a continued scheme of some sort. But again, it all comes down to resources and, what money will be available for it. But we have been continuing to fund the Bright Start in the absence of an executive strategy. Do you want to say a wee bit?
Yeah, I mean, we are aware the Health and Social Care Board are the managing agent for that scheme on our behalf, and they in turn subcontract to Playboard NI, who are the delivery agent. And as you know, Bright Start is from 4 to 14, it is just school age. So, yeah, there are lessons learnt to be coming through from that, and we do engage with Playboard, with the Health and Social Care Board, to look at where there was some failings in that scheme that was put in place and where what worked well. So there is an interim evaluation that was carried out, and currently there is a case study review on successful cases and also the lessons learnt that we would need to take on board and look into the future.
Thank you.
Okay, Catherine, thank you. Robin Newton.
Thank you, Chair. I thank Mr. Brush and his team for coming. I was delighted at least to hear all those positive words about investment in education rather than cost of education. As I hope I made the point on Monday that, you know, if we don't invest in, particularly in this area of our young people, that the cost to the other departments as they go through their life is going to be greater. And if we do invest as much as possible, and when the Minister makes his final bid, and you guys prepare the bids, I hope I would speak for the committee that you would have the support of the committee in that investment programme. Can I just ask you a couple of short questions, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Brush made reference to the historical benefits analysis, which has, and I find parents who are working actually find it difficult to get places because, could you perhaps expand on what might be the route out of that situation? And indeed, I find it difficult to understand the development of a CPD programme for early years practitioners, that no work has been done in that area. I would have thought that was kind of just primary work that would go on a day-to-day basis as opposed to specific work.
Yes, so the point, your first point around the socially disadvantaged circumstances criteria, am I understanding it right that the sense is that it discriminates against working parents?
Yeah.
Yes. Like, I suppose we are where we are in terms of what the legislation says, and the legislation is a product of the historical context in which we found ourselves back when there wasn't universal provision. There weren't enough spaces for everyone. So the evidence very much was there that children from disadvantaged backgrounds most importantly needed to be prioritised in getting this year of preschool. So the criteria at that stage, quite rightly, I think everyone would agree, prioritised the children from backgrounds who needed it most. We're in a different context now. There is a place for everyone who wants it, albeit not necessarily their first preference place, as already mentioned. We also have an imperative to change this, as I mentioned, because we're moving to universal credit. So the legislation as it stands actually quotes benefits that are disappearing before our eyes, and people are moving to universal credit. So we need to do something. So the question is, what do we do here? One option would be to, I suppose, replace the current legislation with a new criteria that continued to prioritise children from socially disadvantaged backgrounds as near as possible to what used to be the case. That would prove difficult because universal credit is a much sort of broader catch-all category. Or we still recognise the need for some prioritisation, but we would want to bring within that children from families who are working but on low incomes, perhaps the sort of challenges that you describe, and the sort of criteria that you might use in that situation would be something like the free school meals criteria, which has a sort of income threshold, but it very much also targets lower paid working families. Or you could decide that actually now that we have enough provision for everybody, you don't need this criteria at all. There isn't criteria like this for primary schools or secondary schools. Having said that, preschool remains, it's not a compulsory thing to do. So whereas going to primary school or at least being educated is at that point. So these are factors that the Minister is clearly going to be taking into consideration. He's already indicated that it is his intention to update the legislation hopefully in time for the next intake. But which of those sort of factors play out is still under his consideration.
CPD for the...
Oh yes, the CPD. Well, the whole sort of workforce development in the preschool context is one that has not been as well progressed as some of the other commitments in Learning to Learn. And indeed, it's an area where at the moment we have a transformation project within the department looking at those bits that just haven't progressed as well as others. And I think the focus up until now has been about getting enough provision in place, but the focus changes to what does quality look like and how can we even maximise the value of the provision that we now have in place. And that's where you're absolutely right, the attention needs to turn to workforce development, continuous professional development, the skilling process. And all of these things are bound up in what Kathy was describing in terms of it sort of is a bit of a game changer. If we go to this extended offer and we have a mix of preschool and childcare, wrapped around that, there would need to be a workforce development component. So we're very much looking at, well, how would we take forward that action in the context of where this policy might take us? Do you want to say anything on that?
And that would have to be taken forward in collaboration with the Department of Health, because they register and inspect all of the daycare and preschool, non-statutory preschool settings. But while there hasn't been a very specific CPD programme, there has been developments in terms of how staff can avail of other opportunities. So as part of Learning to Learn, we've implemented some cluster arrangements at early years level where, a bit like Learning Leaders, where they actually learn from each other and cluster, and we've supported that. And there's a pilot cluster established, and that has been just recently inspected by the ETI and evaluated by the ETI, and that will be moving forward in terms of how we expand on that. So that's in place. As well as that, Paul had referred to the Getting Ready to Learn, the Getting Ready suite of programmes, which has, as a byproduct, improved staff confidence in terms of engaging with parents and supported settings to do a bit more work in terms of engagement with parents and how they work on children's overall development and the collaboration again with health. So whilst we haven't got something that's called a CPD programme, there has been elements of progress that have enabled staff to do more and to learn more and develop their skills. But I think we do need to take it now in the round between early years and childcare, and it's something that the childcare strategy has identified in terms of how we develop the workforce, how we develop the workforce, how we show that we value the workforce, and how we support the workforce in some form of career progression and improvement, because that has come through very clearly in the consultation around how they feel valued and supported, and how as a sector they don't feel that their status is clear or understood.
Yeah. If I can just come in there in terms, I think it's important in relation to your question, Robin. The EA Early Years Inclusion Service does have a capacity building programme for settings that is available on our website, and settings can actually enrol on the various training programmes via the website, and that is followed up with evaluation. So that has been rolled out consistently across the EA over the last 2 years, and it has now been opened up to include non-statutory PEG settings. So at some later point I could share with you exactly what those different training programmes are, and as of now the evaluations for those trainings are actually very, very positive. So that's something that we in EA are endeavouring to develop and provide more of that training, and actually bring about a blended offer, which also includes more online training as a follow-up to the face-to-face training. So that is something that has been developed in relation to SEN.
And Piece 4 has sharing from the start. There's various aspects of programmes and initiatives that have actually developed staff, but we don't have a Northern
Specific,
Ireland
yeah.
strategic
I think-
approach.
I guess just the difference between staff development and continuing professional development. Yeah, that's-
Yeah.
Chair, I just would want, when would you think that it's a piece of work not done, when would you think it will be done?
Well, I think a lot of these things are now bound up with whether we can move forward and how quickly we can move forward with the sort of childcare piece that Kathy described.
Okay.
So, to the extent that it's going, we won't wait forever. If it emerges that the budget isn't available for some of what Kathy was describing, but I think we are at a real juncture now where it would make sense to wait and see what happens. Can we secure the budget for this expansion? And if we can, it should be part of that.
And the other actions in the strategy, you know, so it's not just about the 3 to 4 offer, it's the whole package of the actions in the strategy. And a big focus is on workforce development, and not just the childcare workforce, but the integrated early years and childcare workforce.
Thank you, Chair.
Deputy Chair Karen Mullen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. There is so much, and we're not even getting to touch on it all today, so I'm going to try and get this to flow, just picking up on some of the previous contributors. Firstly, I suppose I want to say before I start that I want to commend the work of EA's preschool unit over the last number of years. I have seen a vast improvement, particularly with the online, in terms of the provision and getting young and children placed, where we would have had a vast number of parents coming to us. That is reduced. So we are, I suppose, moving in the right direction. But I do want to pick up on one of the things Paul, you were saying about the factors for the minister, and I know it's been said a number of times this morning about maybe parents not getting their first preference, and it's not just as simple as parents choosing somewhere because that's what they like and they want to go. We still do have, and there's areas where it's not consistent and there's not equity of access. We have communities here in the north where parents are expected to travel up to 7 miles, and that's called provision. Many of these families are on low incomes. They don't have access to care. So there is children sitting at home, and we've heard and we know about the benefits of preschool provision, and Kathy highlighted so many of them. That brings me on to my next point, and Paul had touched on about community and voluntary nurseries. One of our preschool units got in touch with me this week, and they've been operating for 25 years in my constituency in an area of high deprivation, and they're looking at closure. I feel over in this, and it's been touched on today, this has been due to lack of funding and investment, and I also believe, in those cases as well, just a lack of support. Somebody who comes from a community background and whose children accessed any of these groups when we couldn't get into the strategy, the benefits that my children, but also as parents, that we get that comes from it. So it is looking likely that this group will close after 25 years, which leaves in my constituency and others very little community and voluntary playgroups or preschool settings left. So it's a really worrying concern. And I suppose that brings me on as well around Bright Start funding. I know we got an update here. Bright Start funds a number of after-schools clubs. Yeah. And in some areas of high deprivation, there may only be one that is funded. If Bright Start is removed, that after-school will go. So we are looking at the majority of households experiencing child poverty are working households on low incomes. So we're going to possibly lose after schools, summer schemes, and then what those clubs also provide, as we know, is not the educational, physical, mental health, social activities, all of that that's there. It's not just there to provide childcare for the parent. The child comes first. So we are looking at, if there's not something to replace, we will be looking at communities, the most disadvantaged communities, and parents on the lowest income, and those children will possibly be facing no after school as well. So I wanted to just sort of ask, you know, just listening to the presentations, and as I say, there's so much more. You know, is the direction of travel in terms of childcare been looked at more? Is the direction through formalised preschool rather than an inclusive model of all childcare settings?
No, it's very much mixed. So, in terms of the offer, the offer, I think there's an awful lot of focus on the offer. But when we're looking at finalising the strategy for executive consideration, it's the wider offer of childcare. So it's from 0 to 12, potentially up to 14. And whilst settings can only be registered up to 12, age 12 for a child, I think there was some feedback around, well, could we not use some of our after schools or youth facilities in terms of how we would provide services even for some older children or for children with a disability? You know, their needs are going to go beyond age 12. So we're looking at it in the round, and what I would say about the 30-hour offer is it is going to be based around the existing preschool education system. So that's our universal offer. It's already available. The infrastructure's there. It's been built up over all of these years. So that aspect of it will continue in terms of a preschool curriculum-led qualified staff delivering that preschool education curriculum. Everything else around that is going to be, there's going to be a real focus on quality, how we ensure the quality of the provision in a childcare setting, but not necessarily curriculum-led, but some form of quality framework or play-based framework, you know, where the children just aren't there and being looked after. And in best practice settings, that wouldn't be the case anyway. So although they have to meet minimum standards to meet the registration criteria, many of them are all above and beyond that, and Playboard has a real role in that in terms of supporting how the settings operate. What we would like to see though is whatever goes forward as the overall offer for childcare, there will be a real focus on the quality of the provision and supporting the workforce to be able to deliver that quality, but not necessarily with a very specific formal education focus. No, it will be that holistic view of education where the child's overall social and emotional development, experiences of play and all of that is included. It won't be something that is curriculum led for all of the hours that the child is in that setting, but in the preschool it will still remain the preschool education curriculum, even if it goes beyond 22.5 hours, because currently 40% of our children are getting their preschool education curriculum in a 22.5 hour session.
Okay.
Could I just
Yeah.
pick up on a point you'd made, Karen, about the setting that's experiencing difficulty?
Yeah.
There is the potential, if there are strategically important settings, and by that I mean really very little else in the area, and them coming out would create a real gap. There is the potential for those settings where they are experiencing significant financial difficulty and are at risk to contact the education authority, and there is support available in that very specific context. Is that?
Yes, that's right. If I could add to that, if the setting is strategically important.
We have contacted this week, and as I say, we have a good working relationship with the staff, as you know. It's just, it has been, you know, I've been told there's other provision in the area. What happens is parents will choose the full-time first and then the part-time, and as I say, you know, this is run by part-time member staff and volunteers, and it's just, for me, it's one of the very few that is left in Derry, and if it goes, and I'm sure it's the same for other people. When we're looking at it, and it's just been the years and years, and they've held on as long as they can. They've been told they'll be funded next year if they get the basis, but they probably couldn't hold on to next year, so we can take it up.
Yes, I'm aware of the setting, and I have had a look at the correspondence, so Karen, I'm happy to take that up with you afterwards.
And just a small point, I know we're going to cover it on the next, was, you know, we talk about Sure Start and provision and all, and again, the area that I live is in the neighbourhood renewal area with some of the wards in that, the top 10%. There's 60 places awarded for Sure Start, and over 200 children apply each year. So, you know, and I know that has been increased. We'll pick it up later, but you know, there is a real. And then if we see the community playgroups closing down, that's where, you know. So it all has a knock-on effect.
The one thing I would say is that it, depending on what option is chosen for the 30-hour offer, the extended offer, we don't have the capacity at the minute in the preschool system to deliver that. So there will be opportunities for settings, hopefully, to be able to absorb some of the capacity issues that, or to be able to address some of the capacity issues that we have. So there are opportunities if we go to this 30-hour offer, obviously for children and for parents, but also for settings who could then find themselves in the position where they could offer to take up some of the capacity issues and address some of those.
Thank you. William Humphrey.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Thank you very much for your presentation. Could I just make the point, returning to one of the issues that Mr. Newton raised, in terms of early intervention being more cost effective and also more effective for young people in terms of their education and even across life. Whenever Robin raised the issue of access, Mr. Brush, you came back and said socially disadvantaged children from socially disadvantaged backgrounds. I would just make the point, and I represent one of the most deprived constituencies in the United Kingdom, but I would make the point that those children can come from working families as well. And a decision, an ideological decision taken by a minister before in a previous mandate or previous mandates that has continued is just fundamentally not fair on those families. And so when it comes to the review, I think it's very important that you remember those working families and that their children get the same opportunity as those who come from what you call socially disadvantaged, because some of the parents who get up every morning and go to work can live in, and unfortunately be in low-income jobs that are in socially disadvantaged families as well. There's been some talk about a number of occasions about the Department of Health and working collaboratively between yourselves, and I very much welcome that. But I've heard no mention, particularly around early years, of the Department of Communities. Is there any collaborative work goes on between yourselves and the Department of Communities around these issues? Because I would have thought, particularly around early years, that it would be hugely important that there is.
So in terms of childcare, we have a cross-departmental programme board, and Department for Communities are represented on that. We would also engage with Department for Communities in terms of universal credit and what's happening, because many of the childcare settings are saying that they aren't getting paid for their childcare, and it's because of the issues with universal credit. So we have been engaged with DFC colleagues on that, and there hopefully will be a way of trying to explore that and address some of those issues in the finalised strategy, because they have taken on board some of the issues. Now, they would say, the department would say, well, everybody is being paid in the timescales that they need to be, but I think it's about that sort of paying in advance for childcare and then getting the money. You know, there's some issues around that, and I think they have made. There has been adjustments in terms of landlords, so landlords, I think, are now paid rent, and I know our DFC colleagues are keen to explore this in terms of what can be done. So they are aware of the issues with universal credit and childcare settings, and they are represented on the cross-departmental board.
But apart from the cross-departmental board, and I welcome the issues around the benefit situation, that there's a collaboration, is the department putting any money into the provision of early years?
Yes, we, in addition to the board that Kathy described, there's a project that I've referred to around sort of looking at how all departments are investing in the early years, and are we as joined up as we need to be, and just looking at what we're all doing. And the Department of Communities is on that project. And yes, they are putting some money in. They're not nearly as big a player as we would be or Health would be. They're definitely the biggest players. But some money is going in under neighbourhood renewal initiatives, some of which is targeted at early years activity. So there very much is an awareness of the need to work together on that. We do have sight of neighbourhood renewal proposals when they're considering them, and have an opportunity to comment on the alignment, integration with the wider early years offering. So there is a degree of join up there, whether it's as good as it could be.
And
You're
there-
working to make it as good as it could be.
Well, I think, in fact, all of those joins will come under an increasing spotlight through the children and young people's strategy and the absolute requirement to connect all our activities in this 0 to 4 space to an even greater extent.
Okay. In terms of the EA review and consultation of 2018, there's considerable mention in that document, in the papers that we have in front of us, about special educational needs. A few weeks ago, we met the representative body of special educational needs. When it comes to the department or the EA and taking professional advice, where does the EA or the department take that professional advice from around special educational needs?
In terms of EA, within the EA itself, within the Children and Young People Services Directorate, we would have a range of practitioners and officers who would have years of experience working in special educational needs. Again, as a matter of course, the EA Psychology Service would engage in research in terms of continuously updating their repertoire of knowledge in terms of how best to address special education needs by conducting research in relation to a number of areas.
I think those members who were at that particular briefing would perhaps agree with me that the impression that we got and were clearly given was that in terms of the professional advice that is given or taken by the department or the EA isn't the same as it would be perhaps in other parts of the country. For example, the Barry Carpenter report, I think it was 2015. Why is there no recourse to taking advice from people who are internationally renowned, nationally accepted and appreciated as being experts? Why does Northern Ireland not take that advice? Well,
I have to say, SEN sits in a different directorate within DE, but I'm more than happy to take the challenge.
I accept that, and yeah, I suspected you might come back and say that, but it's heavily mentioned in this paper.
It is.
Mr. Brush. So it's entirely appropriate that I ask you that and your colleague that question.
Yep. And the paper is a consultation document that the Education Authority put out, and I suppose Pat is describing the expertise that they have taken on board in developing it. When it comes to the department...
But I did say in terms of both EA and the department.
Yes, so as what I'm saying, when it comes to the department, I will be very much relying on my colleagues who are the sort of division responsible for special educational needs to assess, advise and assure me.
So you're confident that you have expertise within your department to give that advice?
I don't know is the answer. I would expect they will rely on the expert advice.
I'll finish with this. I think the impression we were left with by those principals was that professional advice was coming from civil servants and not being taken by those who are actually experts in the field. And I'm simply saying to you that if that is the case, and I don't think anything you've said here today in terms of the department gives me reassurance that it's not the case, then I think it's about time that the department's starting to look at that sort of professional, and I might use the term educated, advice around these issues. Mr. Chair.
Thanks, William. Just a few closing questions from myself, unless any other members want brief supplementaries. Which departments are represented on the Childcare Strategy Programme Board?
Department for Communities, Department of Health, the Executive Office,
The
Economy.
Okay.
Yeah.
They are all there then, yeah?
They're all there.
Okay.
Yes.
And has there been any consideration of the pooling of budgets for childcare provision, given the pooled outcomes achieved by good childcare provision?
Yeah, I think in terms of whenever we have a finalised strategy, we'll need to look at who's delivering all of the actions, because the Department of Education can deliver, say, on the extended offer. That will definitely be, you know, something that we'll be taking forward. There'll be other aspects of it that have to be led by other departments, and there are aspects that are funded. So, for example, the Women's Centre's Childcare Fund is funded currently by DFC. So there may be elements of it where, if there's a revised scheme, for example, for Bright Start, you know, we might say, well, what's everybody currently funding that could come into a collective scheme or something like that. But there will be areas where key departments lead and take the lead on certain aspects of the delivery, because it is an executive strategy. So at the moment, there isn't really a budget. We just have a central budget of around 1.2 million or something. That's what we currently have for childcare. But there are childcare services being delivered by other departments in terms of economy, with funds for childcare elements of training courses. DFC funds certain aspects of childcare, and as does health. So yes, we need to look at collectively how do we deliver this, and where are the resources going to be allocated to take it forward.
And Cathy, can I thank you for the extent of engagement that you have and your colleagues have led in relation to childcare through the Programme for Government Working Group, through the All-Party Assembly Working Group on childcare, in the absence of an Assembly way to engage on these issues. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, ongoing engagement with providers in the sector will be invaluable to getting the best childcare framework in place. Pat, can I just use the opportunity to ask about the early years framework for children with special educational needs, and I suppose to return to some of the matters that were raised earlier, I genuinely don't want to make you a lightning rod for our interrogation of EASN provision, but you will be aware of the extent of this committee of parents, of organisations across our community's concern with regards to EASN provision. I presented a 6,000 person petition opposing the proposed reduction in SEN nursery hours from full-time to 2.5 hours. We saw protests against the handling of proposed Belfast special school area planning, and of particular concern has been cases in relation to SEN transport, pupils being left on buses, pupils being left to incorrect addresses, and of course concern with regards to the handling of documentation for SEN school applications, which, as you've alluded to, is the subject of an internal EA audit, even though a lot of people called for a more independent approach to that audit. So you will appreciate that this committee and the public will be shocked and concerned to learn of changes to the EASN management arrangements. And I would ask, does that mean that personnel have been relieved of their duties in EASN management?
Yes.
Okay, and can
For
you...
that part of their duties. They will continue with other duties, but in relation to statutory operations stroke special education, yes.
And can you give the committee any advice as to the reasons for that, given the level of concern that will be in place in relation to that?
I wouldn't be in a position to advise the committee in that regard, but the corporate leadership team is taking that piece of work forward. What I've been advised of is that temporary management arrangements have been put in place, and that is the limit of what I can tell you at the minute.
You can assure that those alternative arrangements are adequate to respond to the wide range of challenges in SEN at this moment in time, yeah? Okay.
I can feed back the questions that you have raised at the minute in terms of those arrangements that have been put in place in relation to that specific area of work. Someone is taking that responsibility. At the minute, it is not within my remit.
I appreciate that you'll take... Yeah, I'll bring in, yeah.
Would it not be appropriate that Pat returns ASAP to update the committee on...
Yeah, and or the relevant personnel, but I appreciate, Pat, that you will take those concerns back. I think the committee will write to the Education Authority to request an urgent briefing. I know that the Education Authority are scheduled to present in relation to special schools in 2 weeks' time, Clark. We may require a more urgent briefing than that. And I'm I'm glad to bring other members back in for supplementary in relation to this. Catherine Kelly?
Pat, this might be one for you. It's more of a comment than anything. In the last fortnight, I've been contacted by a number of community playgroups in Oma who have come under serious pressure due to a small number of PEG allocations. And they want to know why there is a 1 to 6 preference whenever every time their allocation is filled automatically and they have children outside of that. And it's just to make that comment. I think that I myself worked in an e-school and know the pressure that there is that comes on staff and parents whenever the PEG allocation comes through, and you're worrying about if you're going to have to let staff go, and it's something that needs to be considered as well going forward.
Yes, thank you for that, and I can feed that back. PEG adheres to the preschool admissions process, which is for statutory as well, and that is the process that is engaged. I think that some of the issues you see at this time is the result of a decrease in the population. So what you will inevitably find is that there will not be as much need for places in particular areas, and the PEG has to work with that, because what we can't do is fund settings that are unsustainable or that don't have an appropriate amount of children in those settings, at least 8 children, to deliver the curriculum. So PEG has got to work with that. We are conscious of the difficulties that are being faced by settings, and we are listening to their concerns.
Daniel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Pat, just to go back to some of the comments that the Chair has raised, one of the biggest concerns that I'm picking up across my constituency and beyond is the state of CYPS, and also the mishandling of those documents in relation to SEN children. And really the rumbling on of it, but I'm just wondering, in terms of the internal audit, so if a decision has been reached for changes to be made at a very significant leadership level, has that audit now ceased?
What I can advise is that I am aware that an audit was carried out. I know that at a recent committee meeting with the leadership team of EA that they undertook to share the content of that audit, if I'm right, with the committee, or that they were approaching the end stage of signing off on that audit. So again, I would need to raise it with the corporate leadership team. I have not been involved in the audit per se.
When did it cease?
The audit itself, the first stage of the audit itself, would have been completed just in the last number of months, as far as I'm aware, but there may be additional work that is required.
And when was the decision taken for these changes at a significant leadership level?
I was informed of these changes about 4 weeks ago, approximately.
Chair, when were they at the committee?
Less than 4 weeks ago.
Okay, so this is a serious issue then, Pat, and I trust that those in EA will be listening to this, and I sincerely hope that they heed this. The concern of many parties, of all parties in fact, around SEN and the mishandling of it by the Education Authority is of serious concern to me as a local MLA from my own constituency, but also as a spokesperson for education for the entirety of Northern Ireland. This is something that should have been shared with this committee, certainly prior to today, and it's unfortunate, Pat, that you've been put into the position where these questions have been posed to you. That is not what we had wanted, but in the interests of transparency and in the interests of our public and our children, particularly those who fall under SEN, we need some transparency around these things. It's very, very, very disappointing to hear that we have had a presentation in recent weeks and this wasn't mentioned. I heard this whispered very quietly to me in recent days. I haven't heard it anywhere else, and now it's been confirmed today that these changes have been made. The other question is, who has been put in place? Because I think that's an important question. That if there's someone in place, surely you know who's been put in place, and I think that's important to be shared as well.
One of the assistant directors within CYPS has agreed to take on the additional responsibilities associated with special education. It is Una Turbot.
Okay. And given what we've learned today, Pat, and again to stress the Chair's remarks, I think it's vitally important that in the immediate aftermath of today's meeting, that the information is shared as to what action has been taken, an explanation as to that action, what findings from the audit that led to that action, and ultimately what the plan is moving forward. Is there going to be a reform of how these matters have been handled, and what the outcome of the investigation is, and also why senior people with a very significant public profile have been removed from positions of authority.
I confirm that I will undertake to do that immediately following this committee.
Committee, I make a proposal in relation to this as well once our session concludes here. Pat, I do want to give you an opportunity to speak to the early years framework on for children with special educational needs. I was very grateful that you led an EA briefing to the All-Party Assembly Group on Learning Disability when we endeavoured to act as a consultative body to respond to that consultation in the absence of the Functional Assembly. Some of the key issues that came up during our consideration of that issue was obviously the amount of hours for SEN nursery provision. The draft document had proposed 3 hours per day, and also mention had been made of early years SEN centres and I think SEN officers in terms of peripatetic engagement as well. Can you, the consultation has closed and we have asked EA to brief us on an analysis of the consultation response, but can you give us some idea as to the direction of travel around some of those key proposals that were made by the consultation?
Following the close of the consultation, the feedback was analysed and a draft report developed, and I undertook to finalise that piece of work. Notwithstanding the significant interest in this review, at the outset the number of responses was lower than we would have anticipated. We did have 225 online responses in terms of the survey, and then 44 significant responses from organisations. Those have been analysed. They would be for the Minister's consideration alongside the proposed framework. So I wouldn't be in a position to share the detail of that, but what I would be happy to tell you is for a large number of the proposals, there was a high level of agreement. The area where there was a difference of opinion rather than disagreement was around the duration. So therefore that has been identified in the draft report, but again, in terms of how we move forward, that it would be subject to ministerial consideration before I could comment on the outworkings of that. Just on that, again, I'm working very closely, EA is working very closely with our colleagues in DE to expedite that piece of work, and I would hope that we would be going to the Minister within the next number of months following the proper governance processes within EA. Again, in terms of the proposed framework, presenting to the Minister a final framework for consideration that also will include considerations around costings. So work has been taken forward currently on finalising an outline business case in relation to that, and there's a number of key elements that would require financial investment, and that would be the Early Years SEN Inclusion Service, and that would be the early years practitioners, which will enable the downward extension of that support to not just settings children but also parents from as young as possible, and also the early years SEN centres, again working with health to minimise the costs in relation to those two factors. Okay. And again, that would be taken forward pending ministerial approval. If it was something that we did want to do, we would be very keen to do it in relation to working with key stakeholders through a co-design and co-participation process. Okay,
all of which were positive proposals that in terms of the responses you've received. Thanks very much indeed. The committee would be keen and eager to make sure that we receive a briefing on the analysis of the consultation before any final decisions would be made, obviously. So thank you for that. Okay, members, officials, thank you very much indeed for your presentations today. Improved provision of early years, early education, childcare, for all children and young people, but particularly those with special educational needs, is a priority for the committee and obviously for the executive. So we'll continue to engage with you on these issues, and we appreciate your briefing today. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, members. Give them an opportunity to speak to actions here. Okay, members, I give the clerk an opportunity to summarise actions following from that briefing.
So, Chairperson, if I've listened correctly to what members have said, in no particular order, writing to the department, and we're, I think, seeking sight of officials refer to some preschool research on effective preschool provision. Just I wasn't aware of that. So the department appears to have amended its position on the value of full-time versus part-time, and this is based on research. So might the committee want to see the new research?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Additionally, then they referred to an Insight Innovation Lab, so perhaps we could find out more about that and the department's consultation plans in respect of its early years and childcare offer. If that's okay.
Clerk, very, very briefly, just in terms of the research around the optimal duration of provision, there was significant distress caused in the last session by the EA proposed reduction of SEN nursery hours to part-time, and the special schools leadership group that we met with previously under previous leadership gave really strong evidence against that reduction. So it is welcome that research has changed interpretation from the department point of view, and I hope that that will feed into the duration of hours being proposed for SEN nursery hours in their framework as well. So grateful for that action in follow-up. Thank you.
Additionally, Chair, then I think officials referred to an interim evaluation of Bright Start, so members might want to see that. There was the mention of case studies as well. They also referred to the timing of legislation being in place for the next intake, so perhaps we write the department just seeking what their views on when we can expect some legislation on this matter, because that would affect our own forward work programme. Also, members, I provided a table of the Learning to Learn policy at page 21 of your packs. If you're content, I'll send that along to the department. Just ask them to fill in, like where I've said not done or maybe not complete. Maybe they could just give us just a couple of lines, not looking for War and Peace, on the sort of individual bits of the policy. Because as the member had asked a particular question about CPD, for example. Additionally, they referred to a childcare and early years sort of joined upness project, which involves, for example, Department for Communities and talking about their contribution via neighbourhood renewal. So perhaps we could find out the terms of reference, etc., of said group. And additionally, as the Chair just mentioned, we could seek sight of the consultation feedback from the consultation on the SEN special school preschool provision. You can see in your packs at, there we go, at page 168, actually page 178, it sets out the 6 things that they were going to do. So it might be interesting to see what the consultation feedback is. We are seeing the Education Authority in 2 weeks' time to talk about special schools. So perhaps also, Chairperson, that could write to the Education Authority asking them to comment on that, and also on the SEN inclusion service, which is one of the 6 things they're providing. Additionally, then, we're writing to the Education Authority, separate issue, around the reorganisation of responsibilities in the Education Authority, set out what the management changes are, what the reasoning is, the timings, etc. And again, repeating our request for sight of the findings of the audit. We've already written to the Minister about this, as members were very concerned about it previously, and we're seeking urgent update. And if I'm sensing correctly, the committee is content to rearrange its timetable to hear about this as soon as possible.
Or I guess I'm noticing there that the EA is scheduled to brief us on special schools in 2 weeks' time. Are members be content that we ask for an oral briefing of the written information that we've requested as part of that schedule? Yeah, content.
Okay, Chairperson.
Okay, Clerk.
And additionally, Yeah, in previous mandates, the committee has received information, oral briefings from organisations like the Early Years Organisation and Employers for Childcare. Do you want to schedule those in? It would be after Easter now because we were quite full up, but just to give you background, because there was scant reference, for good reason, to things like the Pathway Fund, and we are going to hear about Sure Start another day, so this would help members sort of supplement their knowledge on some of these, which I know is quite extensive in a number of cases around the table, but are you content to have more oral briefings?
Yeah, members, I think it'd be essential that we hear from sectoral bodies and organisations in response to where we're at on childcare provision, and we can designate a day to do that. And if members have ideas for particular organisations they want to invite, I know we've been doing informal meetings, but I think it's important that we hear from organisations like Early Years Organisation, Employers for Childcare, and in public session in relation to such an important issue. Agreed?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Chair, just to go back to that now that we've left the room. 2 weeks ago, they sat there and talked to us about an internal review when a decision was reached 4 weeks ago. Is that any way to treat this committee?
It's clear the Education Authority had all directors, bar a director for Children and Young People Services at that briefing, and had a fulsome opportunity to notify this committee of these changes. They decided not to take it. I mean, you've raised issues previously. In my experience, that the Education Authority communication on matters is as problematic as its administration of matters. There was an opportunity there to deliver a clear update in relation to that matter in order to avoid raising any further concerns about the processes being followed here, in addition to the substance of what the processes are auditing. There is an opportunity in 2 weeks' time here, and I hope and I trust that they will return and avail of that opportunity to provide a more fulsome update with regards to the audit and an explanation for those changes to personnel. Because as I said, and I don't say this to make public show, the issues around special education and these provision are wide and have been wide for some serious time. They cannot afford to be anything other than fully open and transparent in relation to this matter. I will make that request for that information and hopefully take that briefing in person from the directors as well. But I encourage members to continue to take an active scrutiny role in relation to these matters.
But given some of the huge and very public issues around this area in terms of SEN and the mishandling of it by the Education Authority that is well documented and has been publicly spoken of by many principals and teachers and parents, for them to sit at this committee and discuss those challenges with remarks made and comments made by the probing questions of this committee and not mention that there has been a move to remove people in positions of authority and senior leadership is a disgraceful situation. And also, it's clear that there seems to be a conscious objective within the Education Authority to withhold this information until someone like I, who has been told about this in recent days, asks a question of them. I don't think that is appropriate given their ridiculous record on this and also the many people and children, teachers and principals that have been let down by the mismanagement of this entire thing.
I agree. It will only add to public concern around these matters. A full team was available at the committee to deliver updates on this in an open, in a controlled way from the relevant personnel. I have some sympathy, to be honest, that Pat Ward was put in the position where Pat was the EA official who was required to report on such a serious matter when directors were in place to do so a matter of weeks ago.
Can I suggest, Chair, I mean, I have to be honest, colleagues and I discussed it afterward. I think on a number of fronts, the recent presentation this committee had from the EA was inadequate. And questions not answered, figures that you would have thought they would have had not actually given to this committee and so on. surely it would be appropriate for you as chair of this committee to write to the chief executive, the Education Authority, asking the question that why, when there was such a, as you have said, a high-powered delegation here, making a presentation to this committee, everyone around this table would have been dealing with these issues over the last number of years. They're hugely sensitive, they're hugely difficult for the young people concerned, for the parents concerned, for the principals and the staff concerned at the schools, why we were not taken into consideration and that information given to the committee. Because apart from anything else, there's an issue about communication, there's an issue about trust, there's also an issue about common courtesy.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, and I think we will invite the chief executive to return in 2 weeks' time when they're scheduled to brief us in relation to special schools to give us the briefing that they should have given us formally a matter of weeks ago. Yeah, Karen Mullen, Deputy Chair.
Chair and clerk of my memory serves me right, at that last meeting, the chief executive and others were to come back. We had that penciled in and they told us that they weren't coming. So that was on the back of the audit, but they couldn't give us any detail. We'd asked them to come back. So we did have a date penciled in very quickly after that, which we probably would have been informed, and now we haven't been. So my fear in this is, and I know you've written to the minister, if we ask for an audit and they don't agree, or, well, we'll have to take that forward, but there was a date, and I just think that it is unfair that all our officials are going to be coming in here and be questioned by us on it, so the chief executive does need to come in and give us a full update.
But I think we need to be conscious of the fact, yes, unfortunately, Pat has been subjected to those questions today, important questions, albeit.
Absolutely,
But the fact that when they were here 2 or 3 weeks ago, that information has been known within the Education Authority for 4 weeks. So they sat in front of this committee, knowing full well of the serious changes that were made around the questions that were being asked, and failed to mention that there has been a significant change in leadership. That is not acceptable. And I think that that message needs to go very, very strongly to the new chief executive. And I would certainly hope that she's not going to continue the legacy of the previous chief executive, because this Education Authority needs to be tightened up. Communication needs to be addressed around matters such as these, particularly when this assembly is functioning. And maybe it's the case that the Education Authority is so used to rumbling on without accountability, particularly in the absence of these institutions for 3 years. But this stops now. If they're here again and any serious changes are made like that, they need to be sharing it in an open way, as Mr. Humphrey has said, as common courtesy, at least.
I agree. And Clerk will submit that request in writing for that, all information that we have referenced, and for it to be orally presented in 2 weeks when the Education Authority are scheduled to be with the Committee on Special Schools Matters. Content, members? Yeah? Great. Okay. I'll move to agenda item 6 then, members. This is our briefing from the Department of Education and the Education Authority on nurture issues. Can I refer members to the clerk's cover note on the nurture briefing at page 217, the Department of Education briefing paper on nurture provision at 227, an Education Authority paper on nurture and tabled items, an Education and Training Inspectorate Nurture Review of 2015 at page 234, a briefing paper from an evidence session dated 14th of December 2016, and the Queen's University of Belfast Nurture Full Evaluation Report at page 254. And then can I welcome officials to the committee? Mr. Ricky Irwin, Director of Inclusion and Wellbeing at the Department of Education, Mrs. Julie Humphreys, Head of Additional Educational Needs Team in the Department of Education, Ms. Una Turbert, Assistant Director of Pupil Inclusion, Wellbeing and Protection at the Education Authority, and Mr. Sean Irvine, Regional Manager for Nurturing Approaches in Schools at the Education Authority. You're very welcome to the committee today. Our predecessor Committee for Education considered nurture on a number of occasions. Members looked at the QUB review and also considered the issues in respect of the provision of nurture support to IME schools. At the time, there seemed to be a limited number of schools resourced for nurture techniques, and almost all of them were primary schools. I think they numbered perhaps 50 or more, maybe 30 receiving funding from the Department of Education. There was also reference to Nurture in the 2017 to 22 programme government. However, hopefully you can give us a clearer picture on the current state with regards to Nurture provision. It seems that around 1,500 teachers have undertaken the EA training, and an ETI review of 79 schools found that a third of those were availing of Nurture provision. For all these reasons, that the committee is obviously very interested in how Nurture is being taken forward in our schools. So can I invite you to give a short presentation to the committee, and then I'll open for questions. Thank you.
Chair, thanks very much. You've done the introductions for me. We're very glad to be here this afternoon to talk to you about Nurture. I'll say a few words about what's currently happening within the programme, and then we'd be very happy to take some questions. So, Nurture groups bring together groups of around 6 to 10 children, typically from years 1 to 3, who are coming to primary school with the social, emotional and behavioural difficulties, and which prevent them from learning effectively, and if unresolved, would prevent them from achieving their full potential. The groups provide intensive support for pupils with attachment difficulties, immersing them in a safe and caring environment, building their trust and confidence, and giving them a sense of belonging to their school. They maintain close links with the mainstream classes, and they seek to equip the children with skills and coping strategies to allow them to participate fully and learn effectively in those classes. Parental involvement is integral to Nurture, helping parents better understand their child's needs, using them to reinforce the learning and development taking place, and allowing them to see how it can also benefit their home life. Reasons why a child might need Nurture are many and varied, but in every case, if not addressed, those problems become barriers to learning, leading to underachievement and disengagement from school. Preventing that waste of opportunity in young lives is a key aim of nurturing. Nurture groups follow a range of established Nurture principles first developed in the 1970s by educational psychologists Marjorie Boxall and Marion Benathan. It was only with the emergence of research on the effectiveness of Nurture groups in the late 1990s, early 2000s that the approach really began to attract wider interest. Nurture groups here in Northern Ireland were established around the year 2000, and it was through the then Department of Social Development which started to provide funding for Nurture groups as part of the Neighbourhood Renewal Programme. And that aimed to tackle disadvantaged in new and innovative ways. And I think the first schools at that time were Tullycarnet and Ballysally primary schools. In 2013, 20 new Nurture groups were set up under one of the executives delivering social change signature projects. And this was jointly delivered by DE and DSD at the time. And DE also extended the programme to fund 10 previously established Nurture groups. When the DSC funding ended in June 15, the department secured funding to sustain those 30 Nurture groups, while an evaluation of the provision was carried out and a future position was decided. 2 Irish medium schools joined the pilot in September 16, at which time the department was providing funding to 32 schools. However, with the closure of Tullycarnet in August 17, this was reduced to 31. In 2016, we commissioned Queen's to undertake an evaluation of the impacts and cost effectiveness of the 30 Nurture groups. Their report was published in September 16, and I think you have seen that. The findings demonstrate very clearly that Nurture groups are highly successful, achieving the improvements in social, emotional and behavioural skills of children who are previously struggling to cope with school. The report highlighted the particularly strong progress made within the Nurture groups by looked after children and children involved with social services and those with free school meal entitlement. A separate evaluation by the Education and Training Inspectorate found that Nurture groups had a significant positive impact on the children's social, emotional and behavioural development, provided the children with strong coping strategies, helped build resilience and helped the children to learn more effectively. The Inspectorate also found that with the right support, the Nurture groups quickly became highly effective. So, Chair and members of the committee, all the evidence suggests that Nurture can help turn the curve in this area and make a difference in individual lives. The current position within the department is that we continue to fund those 31 Nurture groups, and the Minister, in his previous tenure as Education Minister, gave a commitment that the department would continue to fund these groups until a decision on a new nurture programme was made. So we're currently working on developing proposals for a future nurture programme, which will be presented to the Minister in the near future. In the interim, we're working with the Education Authority in testing the whole school nurture approach across all our schools. This involves awareness and support for school staff on nurturing approaches and allows schools which don't have a nurture group to offer to vulnerable pupils experience social and emotional difficulties arising from attachment issues. Very happy to take any questions any members may have.
Thank you. William Humphrey.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Vicky, thank you very much for your presentation, and I hope hopefully clarification, because I think confusion seemed to reign after our meeting last week in relation to the 31 schools that you mentioned and the 2.5 million budget. We got the clear impression, I think Mr. Bradley and I both asked questions, that this budget of 2.5 million was going to be for all schools that would be included in the nurture system. And I should declare now, as Chairman, I'm a governor at Edenbrook Primary School in North Belfast, which benefits from a nurture unit, and it really does benefit, because I've spoken to the principal, to the staff and the teachers who work in it, and some of the parents whose children have been through it. So it is hugely important to the children's experience at school and their education. But can I just simply ask you to clarify the position in terms of this 2.5 million? Is the 2.5 million to work with the current 31 schools, and what will the position going forward with the addition, what I understand, I think was an additional 2.5 million pounds, is that right?
So, yes, I'm happy to clarify that, and just agree with your point about how useful the nurture groups are. I think the committee has actually written to the department on this issue as well, so we will of course be responding to that. At the minute, the current nurture groups are funded, and it's 2.25 million. The Minister has given his commitment to continue with that funding until a decision is made on the broader programme. So the 2.4 million, which has been identified for the next 3 financial years, is in relation to expanding the programme, building on the existing number of nurture groups, and that of course will be subject to the department securing that additional funding.
Okay.
So the 2.5 million is to continue current provision, and then there's an additional 2.5 million to expand provision, is that right?
No.
No?
So to expand, there's a marker bid down, pressure bid of 2.4 million. To continue with the existing programme would cost 2.25 million, so that is seen as an existing funding requirement. The pressure bid is in relation to the additional nurture groups that would be funded.
So, in terms of the, I welcome the clarification around the 2.25 million. There's obviously been £250,000 lost somewhere along the line since last week, but in terms of the money going forward, the 2.4, how many more schools then will be brought into the nurture net to allow those young people to benefit?
I think ultimately that will be a decision for the Minister based on the criteria that's set around expanding the programme. There is a broad figure of how much it costs to run a nurture group, in and around 70,000.
But he won't obviously really pull schools out of the air. You will be presenting him with a paper of schools that you will have assessed.
Absolutely, and it's not just about the funding of the nurture groups, it's also about the funding of the whole school nurture approach, which is really about trying to embed nurturing principles right across the wider school network. So an element of that money, we would advise, should be for that aspect of the work. So it wouldn't be about every single school having a nurture group.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, William. So the 2.25 million is baselined. That funding exists to continue provision.
It's an existing funding requirement, Chair.
Okay.
So
existing funding?
Well, of course, we don't know what the budgets are for next year.
Okay.
But like I say, the Minister has given that commitment to maintain the existing groups.
The 2.4 million is requested. It's bid for funding. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And as Mr. Humphrey had asked, that would be allocated in terms of a criteria. Can you give us a bit of more idea of how a school is awarded funding for nurture provision?
I can tell you how the existing groups were selected, if that helps.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be great detail, just,
no,
you know.
So the criteria applied under the Delivering Social Change signature project related to primary schools which had levels of above average free school meal entitlement, below average attendance rates, and below average results for Key Stage 1 and 2, and above average numbers of pupils with statements of special educational need. So they were the objective criteria that were set between DE and DSD, it would have been at the time. Then there were an additional 10 nurture groups that were brought on board, and those were existing nurture groups that were being funded primarily by DSD through neighbourhood renewal. And there was a further set of criteria that was used there in relation to extended schools criteria, and the schools were ranked according to free school meal entitlement. So they're the broad criteria at this stage.
Free school meal, is that numbers or percentage of pupils at the school, or is it percentage term or real terms? Percentage terms? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, percentage.
Okay. I've come across instances where you can have an apparent low percentage of free school meal pupils, but high number if the school is a large size. So just interesting from that point of view. Have you managed to establish how many schools have unfunded nurture provision?
Yes, we are aware of around a further 19 nurture groups which are in place but not funded through the funding.
Okay. Bring in Daniel McCrossan. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome back, Ricky, and to your colleagues as well. Whoever prepared the briefing paper for this is very good. There's a lot of detail in it.
Thank you.
So
these folks around me.
thank you for that level of detail. It's a very interesting topic. And just, you've covered some of this, but so there's 19 schools registered. Is it how many?
No, so we have 31 groups funded.
31 groups. Right.
We are aware of a further 19
That
that operate the nurture group
Yes,
system,
that's right,
but they're
right,
not
okay.
funded by us.
Okay, I was just getting my head around that. So, see in terms of in table 1, it says it looks at school. Why are no schools being added in the 1920 period at level 1?
Let's see now. Is this on page?
Want me to answer that?
You want to answer that one? Okay.
The 1819 was when the whole school nutrient approaches model of support kicked in. So that information went out to the 813 primary schools across Northern Ireland, of which the 256 engaged with the level 1 at that point in the September.
What was the figure, sorry?
256.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Out of the 813 primary schools.
Okay. Ricky, can you give some, we touched on this the last time you were here, and you mentioned the holistic whole school approach. Could you maybe expand a wee bit on that? I think Mr. Newton was very interested in it, and I'd be interested in hearing a wee bit of an expansion on that as to exactly what it is, in terms of establishing nurturing approaches to support all the children. So what do you mean by that term, holistic whole school approach?
Thank you for that. And I'm conscious that I didn't probably answer that question very well the last time from Mr. Newton. And I think if I remember correctly,
strike that one off.
if I remember correctly, the question was, what do you do for a child that walks into school and hasn't had breakfast that day? And I think I said that we hope that that school applies a whole school, whole child approach. What does that mean? Well, I'll let Sean come in a second in terms of describing the whole school nurturing approach, which is really what I should have said at that time, but I'm now properly informed. It is about the school being able to recognise and identify those children who are vulnerable from the moment that they walk in, and being able to put in place something to deal with that. And that could be as simple as providing breakfast. And I know from some of the visits that I've had in recent weeks to schools where this happens, that whole school approach does apply and works very well. In terms of the proper theory behind it, this is where I ask Sean to talk a wee bit more about the whole school nurturing approach, because I think that nurturing approach is, if we can embed that within our primary schools, without the need for nurture groups, we're likely to achieve fantastic results.
Yeah. So the whole school nurturing approaches model of support is primarily based on this dissemination of good practice from our current 31 nurture groups. Obviously, nurture will be well embedded within the 31, and definitely we need a whole school approach for that nurture group to run effectively and as effectively as it possibly can. So the premise of the model of support is to take that best practice, to take the theory embedded within nurture and the 6 principles of nurture, and to disseminate in the first element an awareness raising, understanding of what nurture is, and then certainly build on the capacity and knowledge of what nurture can do in our primary school sector.
Go ahead. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that all children need nurtured. Every child needs to be nurtured, and our schools need to be nurturing safe places for all children. And it's not just the teachers who are teaching children who need to nurture them. It's the dinner lady, it's the lollipop, not the lollipop man, the patrol man. It's everybody who notices.
If you have one these days.
Yeah.
And
But it is
person, by the way.
it's the whole school community getting behind and having developing an ethos within the school, which is caring, compassionate, and notices children. Any child who needs help, as opposed to taking a different approach, which might be about asking them to take time out or other methodologies that have been used.
Yeah.
That's what nurture. It's about creating safe, secure space for all children that they can benefit at that level. And then for those who have additional needs and additional responses, that's where we need to then put in additional nurturing interventions.
So it very much links to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago around emotional health and wellbeing, and I see the whole school nurture approach as a key mechanism in terms of informing our framework around emotional health and wellbeing.
So there's a difference between a nurturing approach and a nurture unit.
Yes.
You might explain why ETI review of mental health and emotional wellbeing in 2018 found that of the 79 primary schools polled, a third appeared to have developed nurturing provision. They may not necessarily have had a nurture unit then, which is why your numbers are closer to 31 funded and 19 unfunded nurture units.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And I mean that's pertinent in terms of constant reference to the need to build resilience in children and young people, that this may be a way to progress that. But I imagine we do need some more long-term funding and longitudinal study of the practice to bottom out exactly what that looks like. Yeah,
I think that's right, Chair, and I think Queen's identified that as part of their evaluation. I mean, overall, their evaluation was very positive. We have a really strong evidence base here, and we need to move on that. But they did say that we need to be cautious in terms of the findings, because we would need further research to see what the longer term outcomes would be and to compare that with those children that haven't been in nurture groups. So that, of course, requires us to look at that over a number of years.
Okay. Daniel, I think you'd asked the original question.
Yeah,
you want to come back in?
He answered the next question that I had in relation to it. Thank you for that explanation. I've no doubt that Mr. Newton will want you to expand on it further. Just in terms of the 31 existing units, there's proposal for 29 new nurture units. Is the criteria going to be different in relation to those?
So there isn't a proposal for a set number at this stage.
Right. But is there a rough guide or rough understanding?
What we've done is there's a pressure bid for 2.4 million.
Yeah. Right.
And in very broad terms, and I don't wish to determine how much that would be, but that could allow for funding of up to an additional 30, and also allow for maintaining the existing whole school nurture approach, which is a separate amount of money which is needed to support those schools. So it will be for the Minister to decide in terms of the criteria and the balance between funding additional groups and promoting the whole school nurture approach. And my advice would be that that balance needs to be right, because we can achieve a lot with the whole school nurturing approach and training schools in the principles of nurturing without necessarily having to have the groups in place.
Well, in your opinion, do you feel that the criteria will, do you get a sense the criteria will change or should change? Or?
We really don't know at this stage. It would need to be based on robust and objective need.
Yeah.
I feel that the criteria that was used in 2013 for the signature projects was at that time correct in relation to free school meal entitlement, in relation to attendance levels and attainment levels. I mean, that is the obvious starting point for us. But again, I think it'll be for the Minister to decide if that criteria needs to be widened or if it's not suitable anymore.
And just briefly, how will the department support the schools that are operating on their own initiative in that regard?
So as Sean said, he and his team have been supporting schools who have approached the EA looking for advice on whole school nurturing. So it would be our intention to try and maintain that, and in fact, I think try to expand on that if we could. Sound okay? Yeah.
So I think it's fair to say that there's a real appetite from schools. There's a demand that we are seeing in relation to nurturing approaches and to nurture groups. And there's good reason for it, I think, as you have alluded to, that there's real benefit for children and for the school community. So we are very keen to support as far as we possibly can within our existing resources to promote nurture as an early intervention, a prevention and early intervention strategy.
I think, and that's what I was just going to say that this is about early intervention and prevention. Yeah. This is why the focus is on primary schools. And if you look at Marjorie Boxall and Marion Benetham and why they've gone down this road, they talk about trying to get behind the problem, trying to understand the roots of the difficulties in terms of social, behavioural and emotional problems that children have. So nurture groups is about trying to intervene on those issues at the right time, and that investment at that stage in the child's life could potentially have a huge saving for the public purse further down the line.
And just briefly, Rick, and this is my last point, I completely understand and appreciate the importance of this scheme, and I've spoken to quite a few in relation to it. How many, you've probably touched on this figure, so how many have applied, how many schools have applied to benefit from this?
So if we separate the groups from the approaches, right, so we are continuing to fund the 31, so that's still in place. We haven't had an application process, so that's just still 31. 19 schools have picked it up themselves and are self-funding. That could be through extended schools money or whatever money.
What would the cost of that be for the school?
It's around 70,000 per annum.
Right, okay.
In terms of whole school nurture approaches, maybe Sean, you could talk about the numbers.
Yeah, so as I said, to this date we have 308 schools that have been engaged in the model of support through the three stages, the progressive elements. At level 3, we're calling it, is the whole school inset, so that's when the delivery of the capacity building really commences with every member of staff within the school community. And to that point, we, going from January last year, 2019, we've had 88 schools make application for that, and that is increasing because obviously we are on the second phase of that process currently.
Okay, so 88 schools.
Something I forgot to add in terms of a cost. I need to put that in. If you've been to a nurture group, you'll know it's a physical place within the school. It's a safe place. It's a place where there's a living area, a learning area, a dining area. There's a cost to the school to make that happen. So if we have new nurture groups, there's an initial outlay of around 10,000 capital. So if we had 30, that's 300 grand. That marker is down as well as part of our pressure bid, that 300,000 capital expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dan, who delivers the capacity building for whole school nurturing approach?
Delivered by the EA. There are a number of teachers that have been employed who are off the substitute teacher register, and I think Sean manages that process. Can you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so from September 2018 to current day, the additionality funding allowed us to employ further members to capitalise on the model of support. It is a three-stage process, but when we get to the level 3, not only is it capacity building for the whole school, but there will be follow-up capacity building sessions on the interventions that our nurture groups would utilise, and in addition to that, to really establish the methodology and indeed the interventions within our schools. Our staff are modelling those interventions with key targeted classes within the school community. So if you imagine nurturing approaches as a universal capacity building programme, nurture groups would be more targeted and moving into the more intensive work, whereas the whole school element really capitalises on that universal and moving into a more targeted element.
Okay, so there is a reasonable body of work developing here in relation to this then, yeah?
There's a good evidence base that's being built on, yeah.
Okay. William, did you want to come in
Yeah,
on
just
something
very
that was
briefly,
raised there? Yeah, yeah.
I meant to make this point at the my earlier contribution. You rightly identify that going back to sort of the initial pilot, that it was monies that was provided by the then Department for Social Development. The successor department is obviously Department for Communities. Are they being of any assistance in terms of money? Can they, or have they been approached?
Well, they may be funding some through their neighbourhood renewal programme, actually. Some of the ones which we're not funding. So I know
because I'm just wondering if there's money that is coming through Department of Communities, does that mean, I mean, why would every school not want one of these units, having been involved in one, and say the school in which I'm a governor, but also visited others like Curry? You know, they are of such import and make such a difference to the young person's life, and what Robin talked before, the school day, the school experience. And I just think, you know, we need to maximise the number of schools that actually can participate. So, you know, if there are schools that are being supported potentially through that route, through communities, I think then that might mean that there are more that can be involved, because it's just so hugely important. And look, the other thing I pointed to make, sir, Chair, is I thought it was back at school there, is thanks for all the work that continues to be done, because it is making a difference and it's really, really important. Thanks.
Okay. Robbie Butler.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, guys. Really important piece of work, and I seem to say it every time people come in. However, last week I found myself tweeting out whole school, whole child, but what I would like to add to it this week probably is whole school, whole child, every child. And on that, it will become no shock to you guys that one of our priorities is peeling back on the SEN provision within all schools, and particularly within the topic of discussion today. So I've just about 3 questions here, and I'll fire them out, and hopefully I'll not ask any more, or the chair will tell me off on the other side. So if I can just give you the questions, and perhaps you can pick them up. So what are the impacts and outcomes for children with SEN? Is the starter. Are there any funding implications with regard to perhaps improvements, positive impacts on children with SEN through Nurture? It's also my understanding that that on-statementing any identified resourcing is financed by EA, by the school, and if that is the case, is there any implications with this programme? And that's it.
Thank you. I suppose what I would say initially is, I know we're due to come back to the committee in 2 weeks' time on SEN, on the new SEN framework, and that might be the better time to get into the detail of some of those questions, unless you're able to.
No, I think that's a fair suggestion, if you're happy with that.
Well, I think one of the because, and that's why I'm thinking it's the whole school, whole child, every child.
Yes,
that's
including those with SEN.
Yes, including those with SEN. So, and the children with SEN will have particular difficulties perhaps within this, and I'm sure it has been picked up in some of the measured outcomes.
It has, and I think in terms of the special needs that we're talking about for these, you know, for some children, it is about their social and emotional and behavioural difficulties, which was actually their barrier to learning. And what we're hoping, you know, we're achieving and working towards with these children is increased self-awareness and their self-efficacy and their own self-belief in who they are, their emotional literacy, their motivation to be involved in school life and in learning, and particularly in relation to their relationship building and their ability to be empathetic and to themselves and others. So there's certainly those are key outcomes that we are working towards whenever we are delivering on nurturing approaches. You know, through the Boxhall evaluations, and whilst it's early days, that we are seeing some improvements in relation to those Boxhall scores for children who have learning needs.
Yeah. And I think that's my point, is that you talked about the cost implication of providing the service, I think £10,000 per school. There's obviously resourcing issues and finance issues when a child is statement in terms of, so some of the offset stuff, for instance, under the Queen's study, is recommending areas which actually speak very easily into SEN provision. So my question would be, is it EA, for instance, if a child being statemented, EA, and there's a resource implication, is it EA that have to deliver that then in terms of the budget and the resourcing? And if that's the case, then in the nurture provision, then is it potentially an offset saving?
So I suppose it depends where the child is on the SEN register, what stage. So the current framework has 5 stages. In terms of stage 1 and stage 2, that's primarily school-based support. So the stages will be determined by the school and they're best placed to assess where in the register the child is. If they're on stage 3, then that moves into the realm of the EA provide the support. And that can be through the services that the EA currently provides, and that's through an educational psychologist assessing the child and then determining the best services required. And then, of course, stage 4 is the statutory assessment stage, and stage 5 is where the child has the statement. And the statement will specify exactly what is needed.
Yes.
Possibly in which particular school, but it will go into detail in terms of the educational needs and how they need to be met.
And I'm probably pretty bad at asking the question. So at stage 5 and the resourcing plan has been identified, the EA, it's my understanding that the EA, if it's been identified as the EA, then are charged with the responsibility of providing that. So in the nurture setting then, where some of it might be offset by this investment, is the value that I'm trying to balance here. You know, it seems like good value. So I'm just thinking it's a really good case to maybe pick out in the
I think the difference there, Mr. Butler, is that the nurture intervention is supposed to be short term. It's supposed to be 2 to 4 terms.
Okay.
If a child has a statement, that statement will be reviewed every year, but could stay with them for the duration of their school life.
Yeah.
So you do get that added value in terms of in the nurture group, because the statement might say that the child has social, emotional and behavioural difficulties, which the nurture group is able to satisfy and build on. But once that nurture group has finished for that child and the child's reintegrated into mainstream school, the statement and those needs are still there potentially and will still need to be met through whatever is required, and that's where the EA are there. Is that accurate?
No, I think that's fair to say. I think the important thing is that I suppose it is the whole purpose of early intervention. So if a child has social and emotional difficulties, that is actually their barrier to learning, and we can intervene in that early school years. What we would like to see is that they no longer need that level, that they build resilience and are able to cope, and therefore further down the line they actually don't need statemented for additional provision in relation to social and emotional difficulties.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that in 2 weeks' time we'll have much more to chew over this and that. But I do appreciate. I just had the fear that we would miss it today, we'll go back to it and then we'll say, well, no, that was nurture. You should have asked that when we were talking about nurture. So I think there's a correlation in there, and I do accept that it is perhaps.
We have a figure from our 31 funded nurture groups, which would suggest that 54% of pupils that come through our nurture groups would move down the code of practice, and as Ricky suggested, it's between stage 2 and 3 of the current code of practice that a child would be attending a nurture group, so 54% of them would move down the code of practice in that sense.
I suppose that builds on the evidence base then to say that nurture works. Yeah.
I presume the selection of pupils for participation in the nurture unit is for the school?
Yes.
Yeah.
The school
but based on similar criteria to the criteria used to fund the nurture unit?
It's based on the Boxall profiling,
okay,
which was developed by Marjorie Boxall. So there is a questionnaire, and then the school would regularly assess the children who are in the nurture groups 2 or 3 times a year and see how they're progressing across various competencies.
That is a pertinent question from Robbie, though, in terms of if you can provide us with a bit more evidence of the impact of nurture unit provision on social and emotional skills of pupils with special educational needs, that would be helpful. Thanks, Robbie. Karen Mullen, Deputy Chair.
Thank you for your presentation, and glad to finally meet you, Sean. I've been on the phone to you over the last number of years, and you provided great information and advice for myself in relation to schools. who have accessed the training. And two of the schools, primary schools in my area that have a nurture unit that I have had the pleasure of visiting on a number of occasions is St Paul's and Holy Family. So just as Ricky has said, you know, going on, seeing how it works, seeing the function of both of those schools, and it's just something that I had said around operate the whole school community. But when we talk about the whole school community, it is the community. So both of them work very, very closely with the community organisations and the family support groups, so it goes wider. So I suppose any models going forward, I would ask that, you know, is it going to be taken into consideration to be more inclusive in terms of that, having others coming in and working within the nurture unit and providing services like, and I know in some of the schools it does happen, but maybe more in a structured way, because we know the vital or the role that youth workers can provide, and how young people really relate to them. A lot of this is down to the people involved in leaderships, and we see the good work in that. So it was really around that. And then the last day that yourselves was in around the mental health and wellbeing framework, I had the opportunity the following day to attend a post-primary school in my area, Oak Grove, which has a nurture unit. So we heard that day, Ricky, around the pressures in terms of counselling, the waiting lists and support. So again, visiting the school, meeting with the staff there and the young people, and I think it was said that day that, you know, the pressures, counselling's not for all young people, and very much I heard that loud and clearly that day. So in terms of the nurture, it's immediate access. They're not on a waiting list then for a couple of months. It's immediate. A lot of this stuff can, you know, staff can support young people, or they can, you know, signpost to others or whatever immediately rather than a counselling. So young people are very clear as well that there needs to be a range of support, a range at the earliest stage. So again, I'm hoping that that's going to frame the work going forward. A lot of my question has been answered around the criteria that Daniel had asked, but it's really going to be about how you manage that demand that's going to come forward. And again, I suppose if we had the budget, I believe all schools, primary and post-primary, should have this, but we don't. So in terms, you know, at the minute there's two different sets of criteria, and Ricky, you did go on it, and there will be options presented to the Minister. But it's going to be how we manage that demand, and have at this stage, is there an expression of interest has went out to schools, or are you just working off that, you know?
I think if we separate the nurture groups from the whole school nurturing approach, there hasn't been an application process for nurture groups, but of course, you know, there have been approaches and representations by yourselves and others who have said their school in the area would like to have a nurture group, so we're aware of those. In terms of the whole school nurture approach, there was an expression of interest that was opened up to all schools for them to approach the EA and for the EA to work with them. So that has actually reached out to, I think, 250 schools and has been quite successful. So it's easier to fund the whole school nurturing approach and support the principals within the school than it is to actually get the funding and set up a new nurture group.
Yeah.
So a nurture group wouldn't be the right answer for every single school.
But it's going to be difficult to manage the demand, because as you say, you've obviously been approached by even us, and that's only a small number that I have highlighted. So thank you.
Okay, Catherine Kelly.
Thank you for your presentations. I've visited schools in my area as well that are doing amazing work, and I think that we also have to commend the work of, well, not just the schools that are funded, but the schools that are unfunded, and they're taking this on without any resource, and at a time when there are a lot of pressures in schools, but ultimately the need is there and the focus is on the child. It's not really a question as such, it is just a comment. I know that we would love to see it in every school. I think the need is there, especially when we talk about the mental health and well-being of our children and young people, and early intervention. and in relation to as well adverse childhood experiences. And you mentioned, Una, about building resilience, and that's it. And the earlier that we do, the more chance that our children are able to, you know, there are no barriers within school, they're able to excel at whatever they do. And for a lot of our children, school is the only constant in their lives. And that's unfortunate, but it's how it is. And the likes of the Nurture programme is something that does need to be embedded. And if we had a magic money tree, I would love to see it in every school so that every child had that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and we really want to roll this out as much as we can. So when the budget is set, and I know what we have, then we'll work with EA and others in terms of how best to spread the approach.
Thank you.
Okay. Robin Newton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for returning, and thank you for answering my question via Mr McCross and his ability to build on it, Chair. I'm not going to ask a question, Chair. I'm really going to just make 3 comments based on the evidence that we have in front of us. And I do think we are on the cusp of something, I'll describe it as quite exciting in how we address the early preparation for children in school. And indeed the Queen's University and their economic evaluation of the project, and just their short comment which says that nurture groups will present direct savings to the education system through earlier intervention. And that in itself should be telling this Assembly that we are and our need to invest in the education in these early years. Obviously the ethos that you referred to in the holistic approach to the child is based on school leadership and Queen's University's comments around the importance of leadership being a pivotal role, and particularly for the principal. And I do have to say, I think where they're talking about the recruitment of nurture group teachers and the importance of looking at their comments, the importance of looking beyond qualifications and identifying a range of key personal characteristics, including firmness, fairness, compassion, empathy, energy, and so on. And indeed that you then build on the qualifications through, and I was using the expression to the delegation previously, continuing professional development. I think those are, each of those in itself would indicate to us, Chair, that there is something actually here that is, we're moving beyond the experiment, moving beyond the research, and searching for the money to ensure that the implication strategy is put in place.
Just if I could come in on that, just to say I completely agree, and to pick up the point about leadership. I recently met Ashley Galway from Corrie Primary, and she really demonstrated to me the importance of the leadership point. She relayed the story of one individual child that had been through the primary school, that had a traumatic background, and left the school. By the end of the period in the school, you know, the child was pupil of the year, complete turnaround in terms of behaviour and emotion, and that was because of the nurturing principles and the leadership through Ashley herself and the rest of the school. So it is about the child, but there are other benefits here in terms of bringing parents on board and working with the parent-school relationship, also with the wider community, which you mentioned, and also within the school, between pupils and teachers and within teachers. So, you know, the benefits are there for everyone to see. So I really think we pushing this as much as we can.
Okay. Thanks very much, members. Thank you, officials, for your presentation today, and it's certainly an issue that we'll continue to engage with you on, and indeed we are scheduled to visit Bury Primary School and Edinburgh Primary School to experience it firsthand. So thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, members, I'll ask the clerk to summarise the actions and request for additional information resulting from the briefing and the officials have cleared.
Thanks, Chairperson. If I've understood correctly, I think is the committee wishing to write to the Department for Communities, subject to the agreement of the Committee for Communities, just asking about funding streams for nurture. I think when I was Clerk of Social Development, I think that stopped, but let's find out and see what the truth of it is.
Yeah, but they're talking about it might be coming through the
Neighbourhood renewal.
hmm?
Neighbourhood renewal.
Yeah, which obviously they fund.
Yes, indeed, yes, Chairperson, and also to write the department in line with what the Chair indicated, just seeking if they have information on the impact of nurture on SEN and where that places children on the SEN register, as the member also indicated. Didn't have anything else. Members were happy.
Nope. And obviously we do have those visits scheduled, Clerk, in the near future. Yeah.
Yep.
When
Well,
are they?
it's been half term, so the schools haven't answered us, but we will be sorting it out soon. And as you know, we have previously visited both schools, and they're quite easy to do. So should be good.
North Belfast based.
Indeed.
William, that's your rota scheduled for the year. Okay, ticked.
Be such a cynic.
Okay, members. Agenda item 7 then is correspondence. Can I ask the clerk to speak to the correspondence we've received?
Thanks, Chairperson. We have 4 items. There's a summary note which is included as item 7.1 on page 390. If we can ask Chairperson, members are content to follow the suggested approach with the exception of the following. So on page 396, there is restricted correspondence from concerned parents about the alleged use of restrictive practices, restraint and seclusion in schools. The concerned parents indicate their understanding is that DE only requires schools to record instances of restrictive practices. The parents make serious allegations about physical assaults in a special school. Members may wish to note that for their information that ETI has previously reported issues around, on the other side of the coin, special school staff suffering assaults or injuries from their pupils. So
Chair, I actually think that letter has been circulated to MLA.
yes,
Yeah.
right, didn't know that. Well, I've okay then. So I've marked it as restricted.
Not by us, obviously, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
No,
directly by
yeah.
So
Adrian Rodney Shakespeare.
So to explain, members, that the marked it as restricted because it includes sort of personal information which may be of concern to an individual.
I'm content with that approach taken from a committee point of view.
Yes.
Obviously, individual MLAs can decide how they respond to having received correspondence directly. I think the actions that'll flow from this will be the same, regardless of the of how the correspondence is designated. In that, Clerk, I think you agree, and I'm happy to propose that we seek an oral briefing from the department with regards to restraint and seclusion practices, and write to the Education Authority seeking their response as to how the serious allegations have been addressed. Members content with that approach? In addition to the department, I'm aware that the British Association of Social Workers has done extensive work in relation to making recommendations around new legislative guidelines for restraint and seclusion practices, and it might be that on the same day we're receiving the briefing from the department that we hear from BASW with regards to the way forward. It's my understanding that the Children's Commissioner and the Ombudsman for Northern Ireland intend to review restraint and seclusion as well. I'm not sure if when we're receiving the briefing that'll have been initiated at that stage, but if it were to have been initiated, we can maybe invite the Children's Commissioner and the Ombudsman as well to brief us in relation to that. I hope and I expect that this is an issue that the Minister and the Department can make fairly prompt progress on once reviews have been undertaken. Scotland and England and Wales are acting to improve legislative guidance on restraint and seclusion as well, so we need to get our act together and progress that. Members content if we advise the senders of the correspondence as to the actions that we're taking in order to progress this?
Yes.
You content with that, Clerk? Yeah.
Lovely.
Agreed. Okay.
So at page 401 is a letter from...
This? No.
Well, if you like. But, yes, Chairperson,
Yeah.
7.2
Yep.
is at page 392. This is from the Public Accounts Committee. They're intending to hold an inquiry into the NIO report on major capital projects, including Stroul. So for members, I don't need to tell the Chair, the Public Accounts Committee this, but PAC has primacy over matters from when they are added to the PAC's forward work programme until the memorandum of response received from the department. And in fact, I think PAC of late has also been following up on memorandums of response, so the primacy can extend a bit further. So that might make it a little bit tricky for this committee to review procurement issues around Stroul, but I don't think it has an impact in respect of, say, visiting Stroul and seeing what happens next. Additionally, my informal understanding is that PAC are to undertake an inquiry into special educational needs, which they might get to before the summer. I'm looking at Mr. Humphrey.
Hopefully, but there's an awful lot to get through, especially with the first.
There's another one after that. So
That's
it's,
a clock. That's a consideration of a report by the Northern Ireland Audit Office, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, so that it's not on their forward work programme yet, and we'll be
PAC committee.
indeed.
Sure, the chair can change that.
This is why they don't send those notes usually. So Lucy's been very agreeable and sent this note to me, and that's usually why they don't. Because
Let's make sure he gets in for questions first for the next few weeks. Okay.
So just really for members to note. So at page 401 is a letter from an EA employee about transferred redundancies. The committee doesn't deal with individual cases, but if the committee is content, we can write on to the department about the issues raised. It's just to give members an understanding of the redundancy picture in schools. We've already asked for some facts and figures about where the department's going, but there are certain arrangements and practices around transferred redundancies that are they unique? Yeah, they might be. So it might be interesting just to explore that with the department if members are content, Chairperson.
Okay, agreed. Agreed, yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Lovely.
Okay. That correspondence, Clark?
It
Yeah.
certainly is.
Okay, agenda item 8 then.
Can I just make
Yeah,
one
go
point
ahead.
on that? The third inquiry that we've selected is on special educational needs, which the committee might just want to be of interest, and I want to try and get to that for the summer.
Okay. And is that on the basis of the NIAO report, the inquiry? Yeah. Okay, so it follows it up. Yeah.
There's another report, as the member Chairperson of PAC is aware. So they did a report about 2 years ago, which talked all about SEN and statements and such like. And then they were returning again to another report, which is to be published in March. And I imagine the two will be of interest to PAC. But
That's how PAC inquiries work. They kind of take forward the work of the reports.
They gave us about 11 various reports that they have done, of which members came to.
It's a fair backlog. Yeah.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
they are.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, William. Agenda item 8 then, members, is our forward work programme. Draft forward work programme is available at page 403. Okay, the next few weeks' briefings are particularly fulsome. They are important and well organised in terms of thematics, and obviously we need to take the urgent addition from the Education Authority. Are members content with that forward work programme?
So,
Yeah.
Chairperson,
Clark.
what I'm sort of getting at here, is it too much? Because we're just about finishing up one now. And if it is too much, members should just speak up and either now or later. And these things go. It's the committee's forward work programme. Happy to amend. Department might not be too happy, but I'm more concerned that members get the value out of these scrutiny sessions and they're not slaughtered by them, so to speak. Chairperson.
Yeah. So next week there are 3 oral briefings.
There are.
Yeah. Week after that, there's going to be 2 plus. Joint one the week after that, 2. I think members. I think if we appreciate that, given the backlog of issues, that committee meetings are perhaps slightly longer than they otherwise would be, but we are getting through some important issues. So if members maybe want to reflect on the forward work programme, if they think it can be reconfigured in any way, share that with me and or the clerk. And obviously as well, we're exploring visits. A number have been recommended. And if they want the committee to visit elsewhere, can members provide the clerk with details of locations, contact people? And we also may wish to have the committee's visits coincide with significant issues at that location or policies connected to the visit as well.
So,
Okay, clerk, yep.
If we're going to Stroll, when we go to Stroll,
Bring your umbrella.
maybe we'll try and visit Orvalay, as said previously,
Yeah.
if that works for that school. But members also wanted to go to Sure Start.
It's beside it as well. it's on the
Great,
same
well,
road.
so if they will
Yeah, yeah.
contact us with details, so just a person we can talk to, so that we don't disrupt the business of the Sure Start Centre or wherever that we're going. Mr. Humphrey wanted to.
We can also show members how bad the A5 is on the way down.
I've been left in no doubt listening to you yesterday. William?
The Minister for Infrastructure is
Listen
dodging them.
Listen to him, yes, you wouldn't go anywhere near it, would you?
No choice.
Just a couple of points. In terms of the joint meeting with health,
Yes.
are we any closer? And also we did discuss a stakeholders meeting or an event as well, just on those two issues. And thirdly, in terms of the IFAGA sports programme, does that not also include the Ulster branch of the RFU?
Can do.
I think that would be, because I think going back to my decal days, Chair, the three of them would have come in together.
I'm not sure if they still do,
And
but
I'm not sure of that. That's what I'm asking.
but I mean, if we're inviting the IFA and GA to present on the sports programme, I'm open to making it a 3-code presentation as well, because there will be other educational issues relating to all 3 codes that might be pertinent to hear from them on.
Yes, Chairperson, in terms of the joint committee meeting with health, they wrote back and suggested that whenever the mental health action plan is produced, so remember there's a cross-executive group talking about this, so something's supposed to come out within 100 days or so around about that period, and then there will be a revised mental health action strategy, so it's in around there that I think that the joint meeting will happen, and that's what the Committee for Health suggested. And in terms of our event, I'm feeling now that this is going to be an evening event, because I think it's going to be a bit bigger.
Yep.
What I've done is I've written to the department asking them for their list of consultees, because I'm going to pillage that. I'll come back to the committee and say, look, here's a list of people I think we should invite. Members will supplement that, I hope. And then we can arrange something, an evening event to talk about or the mental health and emotional well-being framework, because given that it's not going to be ready for 10 months, this could actually be a very useful intervention from the committee. Could even be a committee motion if you felt like it, and could usefully inform the department's consideration of this important issue.
Okay. Members content?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Agenda item 10, as I mentioned earlier, the Department of Education briefing on the emergency bill has been deferred. Therefore, the date, time, place of our next meeting is Wednesday, the 4th of March, 9:45 a.m. here in room 30. Committee meeting does now adjourn. Agreed.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.